Welcome to Franchise Killer, a podcast where we pick movie franchises or wannabe franchises, review them film by film, and see where things went wrong. Or right, Dave. Right, Dave?
Yes.
Or right, Dave.
I'm ignoring you because I'm ignoring you because I'm about to take out your memory cards, so you can no longer remember you're on this podcast.
You know, it's kind of sad.
Sing the Daisy song.
It's kind of sad that we didn't do this one directly after our monkey business, because it would have been the perfect segue.
I'm kind of glad there's that separation. It would have fit right in there, but it's still like so. This movie is so dense.
Yeah.
Well, think about it like this: you go from monkey business, and then after monkey business, you have this one, which has monkeys in the beginnings, humans next. Then you move to Dune, 1984.
Future.
And then whatever we have next.
Well, we do have Robin Williams, a particularly hairy man, as our
that is fair.
He was the bridge.
Yeah.
He does have a metamorphosis in Mrs. Doubtfire.
He's a true gom jabber.
There was definitely a moment in this where the ape picks up the bone, and I'm like, is that you, Caesar?
Yeah, I know.
I think that it's funny you bring that point up because as a kid, before I had even seen this movie or Planet of the Apes, I thought they were synonymous, like those scenes. Mm-hmm. So I would get mixed up when I would see references to the monolith and think, oh, Planet of the Apes. And people are like, no.
This might be the same year. I think
It
Planet
is.
of the Apes
It
was
is the same
68.
year.
Yeah, that's crazy. Another funny observation before I go into the actual show. I think the ape actors here are more realistic apes, but the costumes aren't as good. And in Planet of the Apes, I like the costuming better, but they definitely don't act like apes, which they're not supposed to because they're humans, but whatever. That's my takeaway. Anyway, I'm Reese. Across from me we have
David.
To his left.
Irina.
To my right.
HAL 9000.
Also known as
Noah.
And sitting down calmly and taking a stress pill to think things over, we have
AJ.
And
just trying to figure out how this zero gravity toilet works.
this movie is weirdly funny at times. I'll say that. That's just
There's a few
Kubrick,
moments.
Though. He's got such a weird, dry sense of humor. Of course, we're referencing the movie we're talking about, 2001: A Space Odyssey, the franchise.
The franchise, which it has another movie.
Yeah, it does, and there's multiple books. Movie came out in 1968. It's directed by Stanley Kubrick, who also directed The Killing, Spartacus, Lolita, Dr. Strangelove, A Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, and Eyes Wide Shut, among a few other movies like way earlier in his career.
I don't really know who this is, but he's got a pretty good lineup.
Middling.
I'd say some people
mixed.
think maybe one of the best directors of all time.
I think he's trying too hard.
He seems a little pretentious to me.
Well, I don't think you're wrong there. He might be a tad pretentious. Or was a tad pretentious. The movie stars Keira Dolia, hopefully I said that right, Gary Lockwood, William Sylvester, and Douglas Rain. There's a bunch of other little, like, very mini bit parts, but I didn't feel like they were really worth mentioning. The movie's written by Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke, based on the 2001 A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke, and also, kind of, who, Noah?
Well, Stanley Kubrick. Yeah, he and Robert C. Clarke wrote quite a bit of this together, but the credit officially went to Robert C. Clarke.
How often does that happen when a movie,
I think I said Robert. I meant to say Arthur.
like a movie and a book are made concurrently, and both of the creators are involved in both works? That's just, you don't see that very often.
No, I think a lot of people would find that to be too much work.
And they must have had a lot of mutual respect for one another, or thought like-mindedly to have this work, because usually people like who are working from this high-minded of a space clash over vision and whatnot. Maybe it was a case of, like, Kubrick was like, I'll handle the movie and you can help a little bit. You handle the book and I'll help a little bit. I don't know.
Considering how, Stephen King and The Shining went down, and other collaborations with authors, But
Exactly.
yeah, Arthur C. Clarke and Kubrick clicked pretty much right away. I think Kubrick had his eye on Childhood's End originally, but the rights for that were locked up. And then The Sentinel was a short story that kind of overlapped a little bit. So he worked with Clarke on developing the story, and then the novel form was released about 3 months after the movie.
Yeah. Anyway, for those that are new to this show, on this podcast, we first go over our thoughts on the film before revisiting it for the episode. Then we dive into the story, break it down bit by bit, and talk about the more significant moments. Then, towards the end of the show, we give our brief reviews and numbered scores, along with an analysis on the health of the franchise and whether or not this film hurt it. So, AJ, had you seen 2001: A Space Odyssey before your prep for this episode?
Yeah, once. I mean, this movie definitely has a lot of hype behind it. I mean, it's got, it's really praised for its visuals and stuff, and kind of had high expectations going into it. But I mean, honestly, I was severely disappointed. I mean, you got the Neanderthal fight with the big cat, the leopard, saber-toothed tiger, whatever thing it is.
1000 BC or whatever.
But I mean, there's no story to speak of. It's just like, why? And even honestly, the visuals weren't even that great. So
I remember 10,000 BC.
All right, and yet again,
10,000 BC, got it.
Yet again, AJ with his own miniseries that he hand-picked specifically. He decided instead of watching 2001: A Space Odyssey to watch the masterpiece 10,000 BC.
I think it's a great film.
A movie we saw in theaters and was awful.
I saw it in theaters too.
Yeah, I remember that.
I think its biggest crime is that it was boring.
Yeah.
Like it had like literally everything from that time period that would be cool, like saber-toothed tigers.
the trailer promised all that stuff, and that was never even in the movie.
Yeah, they did have some of it, but it was just like, it was just bad. And the guy they were too pretty too. The cavemen were too pretty. Where are the foreheads? Come on.
Look, we need Geico involved. Get Geico in here to get their cavemen in.
All right.
Well, anyway, surprisingly enough, I had not really seen this movie in full, bits and pieces. I mean, obviously this movie's permeated culture heavily. So I think, probably like The Simpsons had an episode where they had a smart house that had Hal. That was my probably first exposure to the concept of Hal and, everything else, the sound clips and everything. But no, I had not seen this movie in full, surprisingly enough.
How about you, David?
I have not, although, because of its influence on other areas in pop culture, I've seen so many clips of it in references to it. So, the Dawn of Man sequence, I feel like we've all at least seen snippets of this and thought maybe at one point or another it was Planet of the Apes. There is the classic, I can't do that Dave line. I feel like the zoom into the red dot. There's a lot of stuff in this. So, the warp scene. So all of those are very familiar, but I've never actually seen the movie.
Irina?
Yeah, I saw it once, but it had been so long ago. It's definitely one of those movies where once you see it, you're like, I can probably go a while without watching it again. But even so, I only remembered very particular scenes. And just like you guys have mentioned, it's been so ingrained in our culture, our film culture, that it almost becomes comical when you hear any reference to it. And that's what makes it so hard to watch sometimes, is because you're thinking of the context of all these scenes and all these references being used in like some TV show as a reference in a movie. And it's hard. I wish I could watch the movie with fresh eyes before all the references, before all the pop culture. But so
I really hate that when a movie's been hyped up for so much and everyone says, the lines, the classic lines and all the classic scenes, and then you watch it and it gets to that scene and they're like, everyone was fussing over this scene?
it's like they just couldn't help themselves and they just reference it so much.
Yeah, because it was probably great first time experiencing it, but hearing people just dilutes it by the time you get back to it.
I feel the same way about Star Wars, because I know that like the twist at the end, you know? And so even before I saw the movies, it's like I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And then it kind of, in a small way, ruined it
Yeah.
because I don't get to experience it the way they had.
Yeah, and not to tangent too much, but I had that very recently when you guys showed me You've Got Mail for the first time. When it gets to the I'll have what she's having line.
When Harry Met Sally.
Sorry, yeah, when Harry met Sally. That era of comedy.
Meg Ryan.
Romantic comedy, I know.
Sleepless in Seattle.
Yes, that one. No, but the I'll have what she's having line, when it finally got to it, I was like, yeah, it was kind of funny. Like, I enjoyed the rest of the movie more than I enjoyed that one scene.
Because it ruined it for you.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
fact that everyone knows that scene.
Exactly. Anyway, Noah, how about you? Had you seen this?
I think I watched it one time from it, like a teacher put it on during a science class. For whatever reason, I can't remember.
Best context to watch 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I can't remember why or what we were. I think it was physics.
They had a homework to finish, and so
So you'd seen
made
it.
you guys watch
Yeah, but it was one of those coaches where all he'd do is put on movies,
Yeah, we all know him.
and it was this Planet Earth or something else, and I think that's how
I believe one of our
watched this
coaches put on Gladiator at one point, and
Oh, what a good
which
choice!
is not actually based off of a real event. It was just a time in history. Like,
Yeah.
which is great, dude.
Not even close to accurate.
Educational.
I'm okay with that.
for my part, this is a big blind spot for me as well. I had not seen this movie at all. All I know is some of the iconography from it, like some of the significant scenes. Like I know the ape holding up the bone. I've seen that.
Right.
Like I've seen the howl red light thingy. I know some of the lines. Apart from that, nada. Like this is a big blind spot for me. I've even owned the movie for a while with the intent to watch it, and just haven't. It's always that one that I'm like pushing out to the side. Like I could watch this tonight. But no, it'll still be there in my collection next week. I'll just wait till next
Let's
week.
watch Fast Five.
Yeah, let's watch Fast Five for the 15th time.
Quality.
Yeah. But yeah, I haven't seen it. But I'm glad. That's why I'm glad for doing this show with you guys, because it's given me more reason to dig out some of these classics and watch them, and it's satisfying to knock them off my list and be like, all right, now I've seen this, and
The Dollars trilogy was one of them for me. I was like, I probably wouldn't have seen it if it wasn't for our
and being able to
podcast.
research them too, I understand this movie better than I would if I had just thrown it on one night.
Yeah.
So that I'm happy that this is one that we're covering, and I finally get to tick that off my list. So, David, before we get into that story, do you want to give us a quick call to action?
Quick call to action. I sure can. All right, Reese, can you subscribe to our podcast?
Yes, you can, Dave.
Wait, can our listeners find us on Instagram and Twitter?
Yes, they can, Dave.
Can they find us on Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review? Let us know what they think.
There is a very high chance of that, Dave.
I don't know if there is a high chance of that. I think you might be lying. I think you might be a killer robot.
No,
might
I
be
promise.
compromised.
There is a 100% chance of that, Dave.
You know what? I don't know about you guys. I don't believe him. I think that our host of this podcast is out to kill us all.
No, I believe him.
Dave, go out into the space unit and don't come back.
Just get launched into space. Give us a 5-star. Not that star.
Oh, that was terrible. David, just do a normal call to action.
Yeah, no, it's a star. Yeah, we are out here, and if you enjoy listening to our podcast, if you like movies as much as we do, please help us out. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter. We're putting it up on YouTube right now, and the biggest thing you can do to help us is give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, because that figures into the algorithm and pumps it out to everybody else out there. So
Pumps it.
help us out.
Very good, Dave.
Die.
That's your job, Dave.
This bit is going nowhere.
All right. AJ, you want to take it away with that story?
Dave, do you mind if I ask you a personal question?
No, not at all.
I've wondered whether you might be having some second thoughts about the mission.
How do you mean?
Rumors about something being dug up on the moon. I never gave these stories much credence, but particularly in view of some of the other things that have happened, I find them difficult to put out of my mind.
Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
In prehistoric Africa, a tribe of hominids struggles to survive, subsisting on meager resources, evading the constant predations of a leopard, and competing for territory with another tribe. After being ousted from their area of shelter and water, our group awakens to find a mysterious black monolith now looming in their midst. The presence of this object triggers odd, frenzied behavior in the apes. One of the apes, Moonwatcher, experiments with the bones of a tapir, and soon learns to use a long bone as a crude tool. This blunt instrument soon gets put to use as a weapon, first to hunt the tapirs for meat, and next to retake the watering hole from their rival tribe, Violence. We cut millions of years forward to see the future of both the tool and the creature. Dr. Haywood Floyd is traveling from Earth to Clavius Base on the Moon with a secretive objective. A perplexing artifact has been excavated, which turns out to be identical to the black monolith seen earlier. As the crew begins investigation, dawn breaks and the monolith emits a powerful and shrill radio frequency blast.
Being a person who has not seen this movie, I knew that it was a classic, but I always, in the back of my mind, was like, this thing's going to be a slog. I don't think it's actually going to be interesting, but I know I have to watch it because it's a classic. Like, it's the same way I kind of look at Citizen Kane, where I'm like, I still haven't watched that because I'm looking at it with a side eye, like, I know I got to watch this thing, but...
It's a little bit like
funny,
Tree of Life in that way, too.
Yeah.
Oh, Tree of Life is amazing. It
is.
Yeah,
So is
you
this
have to
movie.
be... Okay, well, anyway, but I had a different preconceived notion. I expected the entire movie to be like kind of a thriller against Hal. And the final culmination is like the, pulling the plug kind of thing. I didn't realize it's going to be kind of broken up in sections where you have literally, pitch black for 2 minutes. You just have this
Oh, yeah.
intro music.
I thought it was going to be this like very contained movie where it is just like one person and Hal. Like, I thought it was going to be like just in a spaceship for the whole time. No, turns out it's not that. And turns out it is not boring. It is slow and deliberate in its pacing, but it is surprisingly fascinating, surprisingly intriguing. And my focus on this episode was to get kind of like a very basic knowledge of everything that went into it, but with a minor focus on seeing like the influences of this movie. And I kind of, after watching this movie, lost a smidge of respect for a lot of other movies I love that like directly borrowed from this. And some movies
there
are
are
obvious.
a lot of them.
Yeah, some movies are homages, yes, and they are aware of that. But other movies are very much
I
just
think
like,
it's homage.
well, let me say it the way I say it. Potato, potato. Okay.
Fair enough.
Homage.
Close enough.
Here's the thing. You're going to correct me, and you know this about me. You're just sticking a needle in my rib right now because you know I'm going to mess it up in the
Actually,
future.
both
anyway.
are correct. It depends on which sense you're using it in.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like I love this movie called Ad Astra, but that movie would not exist without 2001: A Space Odyssey. It is very much
Or Star
pulling-
Wars, for that matter.
Star Wars, yes. Star Wars, like the story though, it doesn't have the same bones as 2001. It's more of an aesthetic, like borrowing.
Yeah.
Whereas Ad Astra is like straight up, like copy paste some things. And I
Well-
love Ad Astra still, but
I mean, in the sense of inspiration, like this inspired Lucas,
Yeah.
just in general, and Spielberg actually.
Yeah.
But yeah. And as far as the slowness, I mean, you have to kind of readjust yourself to receive a story in an impressionistic way. And what I mean by that is, kind of like impressionistic fine art. Like, it's not detailed. It's more like Water Lilies is probably one of the more famous ones. But it's broader strokes, like, of color, giving you the impression, the emotion, the tone of something as an image versus, something hyper detailed. And this movie simultaneously has meticulous detail but impressionistic delivery. But just the lack of dialogue, in and of itself changes the way you have to receive this movie. And yeah, I mean, honestly, a first watching of this movie, me not looking at something through the lens of trying to, I don't know, a film critic or, the behind the scenes and production, and having read the novel, like, yeah, I probably would have been bored. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
So that's perfectly understandable. It's a very different approach. Whereas the novel itself has all the details in it. This one is the impression.
Yeah, well, for one, the movie doesn't start in a typical fashion. It's like it hits you with the striking imagery of Earth, and you come on the scene of all these apes who are they're obviously people, but you get it. They're very good ape actors. I'll say that.
Well, they're mimes. That's
that makes sense. Yeah, and mind you, the first 25 minutes of this movie are no dialogue, but yet it's still telling this visual story that is going to be, I don't know, repeated throughout the movie. Like, it's
right.
This is like the mini feature version of the rest of the movie. Like,
but also, well, I'm going to say, in addition to that, you have to reframe your point of view, because literally the point of view of the camera is putting you as an outside observer. You're not within the set. You're looking at this. Everything's a still shot here. There's no moving shots, panning, tilt, anything like that. You are set almost like a diorama, like looking outside in, observing, almost as, some of the other outside story, like the sentient life would be observing, something like that. So that itself is almost like documentarian. And so it doesn't lend itself to motion right away.
And then that part when Simba comes in, no, I'm just kidding.
So, and this is with Kubrick in general, and this movie in particular. I mean, there's like a million in-depth investigations on every aspect of this movie. There's a plethora, a wealth of information, and that's fascinating. So, I mean, we're not going to try to cover all the same ground that other people have covered,
Yeah.
But we're going to kind of keep it within the spirit of our podcast. Not to say that we didn't do research on technical information. We just don't want to inundate you with that stuff. And it'll still come up. Like, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, David, I don't know if you want to talk about just the filming of the hominids here in Africa. I don't know.
I would love to. Yeah, though that really kind of blew me away when I learned about how they did that scene. So it's the Dawn of Man sequence. And just to start off, it's not going to be perfect because they're using real people dressed as apes, and even nowadays we can't get perfect people dressed like apes. They tried it in 2001, right?
Honestly, they did a pretty good job.
Sorry, I was going to say 2001. That's when it came out.
Yeah,
Tim
you're right.
Burton.
That is funny.
Yeah. Anyway, point is, nobody has gotten it perfect, and I would say they did a phenomenal job based on what I saw in the time period. But what I was most impressed with was the fact that they took these shots in Africa, so the backdrop is gorgeous. They had people fly to Africa. Kubrick had them shoot very specific shots, and then they also built sound stages to get the perfect lighting, get the perfect scenario where they could have the actors on the stage that matched the backdrop. But they actually had what's it called? The projector. They had a front-facing projector, which up to that point they almost always shot projection from the back. So what I was confused about when they were explaining is, you would think that the light hitting them would cast shadows onto the backdrop.
Right.
Well, the fact was they had a camera facing into a glass. Was it a glass or a reflective mirror of the switch mirror? Is that what it was?
Semi-silvered mirror, one-way mirror, basically. That's at a 45-degree angle.
Yeah. And that would allow them to catch the light or get the video without the shadows casted, which I still don't know if I completely understand.
Well,
but it's
that
really
in addition
cool.
to meticulous, and I mean Kubrick was always pushing the envelope of budget, but also the technology. Just making this happen, that's half of his magic there alone is the preparation. But just the lighting itself, the rigging, I mean the control of I don't know how many lights they had, and this is before LEDs, so. The sound, I mean, and they're in these ape suits that they're like over 100 degrees. I mean, it is nuts. But yeah, so they had lighting from above with direct control of
lights.
zones and stuff. Yeah. In addition to the new front projection, and then you have the actual set that rotates while having outside, views from within without being able to get close in. So
yeah, they actually hired mimes to do this stunt work, and I believe they even gave one of them a camera and told them to go to the zoo and sort of record and mimic the movements of apes, which I thought was really cool, and they did a great job with it.
Dan Richter, who's the main moon watcher, just to explore. And I think when Kubrick talked to Dan, and Dan Richter was a teacher, not necessarily an active actor, he kind of was a kindred spirit because in addition to pushing budgets, they're pushing time schedules as well. It's like we have 10 days to shoot this, and Dan Richter's like, this is probably going to be like 10 weeks or 10 months. And Kubrick's like, oh, okay. Like, that really spoke to him, like, yeah, do it right in the detail and learning and exploration. But yeah, learning the apes, which we saw with Andy Serkis and all that stuff with the...
Caesar.
With Caesar, right. So yeah, really
and
doing
King Kong.
the right, yeah, and so really doing the homework. And something that's kind of a misconception about Kubrick in general is how much of a control freak he was.
Meticulous,
and, yeah, he's very meticulous, but he would do meticulous setup and preparation, for a couple years before and setting all this groundwork and skeleton. But on the set, he would still allow for creativity for the actors. He wanted the actors to still bring their own interpretation and magic. It wasn't, taking 100 takes of a shot to get this one little motion exactly how he wanted it. It was taking 100 takes to just explore and see, oh, yeah, I like that. That works well. And so...
I definitely think David Fincher took a page out of the Stanley Kubrick book, because he's also notorious for having, like, a seriously high number of takes just to get it perfect. But the performances in his movies never feel robotic or like they're perfect. It's just like they still the actors still feel organic. Like it's like, so yeah, it's a good observation.
Yeah. So David, I don't know if you read the story about the about Dan Richter and that big transition scene.
With the bone
jump cut. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. So, remind me, was he tossing a broom? Was that what he was tossing?
I think Arthur C. Clarke talked about the broom handle. So this is probably something that is somewhere in between. So the broom handle spun in the air, and he kind of got that idea. But the way Dan Richter told it was, he's on set during one of the many takes, and I believe he said instead of a long shot, he saw he was using a portrait lens, so he knew he was going to be up close. So he did a little bit more intricate body work with tilting his head and being inquisitive about the bones and just kind of experimenting with the bones and playing around. And he, kind of crashed it down, and one of the rib bones happened to pop up, and he thought it was a mistake. But Kubrick was like, no, keep doing that. And he actually just kept doing it harder and harder and popping them up, making them fly everywhere. And then they kind of molded over, I guess. And eventually that just one thing led to another. And then they went to that spinning femur bone.
That's how creative genius happens.
But
also that
process,
scene, that was also done outside versus everything else they did in that scene, which was a soundstage, because they wanted a close-up underside of the ape so you could see things flying in the air. So you had the sky behind them. And so they actually had to remake the stage outside, which, I mean, it looked identical. I'm actually really impressed with how they were able to replicate that interior and exterior stage. But yeah, I thought it was cool so they could get that low angle. And the transition was the bone spinning in the air, and then as it's spinning down, transitions to the spaceship thousands, millions of years later in a similar shape. So,
and you don't know
through
this.
Space.
Yeah, you don't know this unless you're like, have you read the novel or any background? But the bone transforming into that spaceship is actually a satellite, specifically a nuclear like warhead launching satellite, which are all surrounding the war. So it's actually a weapon, a tool, a weapon. So that bone that is a weapon turns into another weapon, just technologically more advanced.
So now that we've kind of gotten our way through this Dawn of Man sequence, I think to explain this storyline that I don't think I would have understood unless I did the research is the fact that the monolith taught them to do what they were doing.
Well,
Yes. So this is the first sign of like you think. Oh, no. I was researching. I went kind of down a rabbit hole. I feel like a lot of us did.
Yeah, it was
But
easy.
It's easy to do that with these movies.
Yeah. Every
We
time
almost
the
have
monolith.
to explain it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
'Cause you
Every
don't
time the
know, it's-
monolith.
Just kind of vague, and which is, that is what it is. That's how this movie is. If you don't do your own research or bring something else to the table, you're left to a lot of your own interpretation, which is how Kubrick wanted it to be.
Yeah, that's what he wanted.
So-
He wants the multiple ideas. But every time this monolith shows up, and I subscribe to this theory or whatever people are saying, that every time the monolith shows up, that is when there's a progression of mankind.
Yeah.
Like that is
Yes.
that is the catalyst
Yeah.
to like something big happening.
That was something I did a little bit of research on the book. I haven't actually read it, but it's literally the monoliths were put in place by an ancient alien civilization to spur the growth of sentient life.
Yeah. Which I never would have gotten just by watching
Right.
this.
Yeah, from watching this, it kind of makes you think that it gave them like, oh, now they kind of know tools and they can throw down. Oh, it almost introduces animosity.
Yeah.
is what it seemingly
Well,
did.
it allows the use of technology to be a weapon, and that causes being to fight being.
Yeah.
But what I thought was cool was there's a video AJ sent us that I was watching that was kind of going into this scene about how they are originally the monolith was supposed to be a pyramid, and the pyramid was supposed to have a screen on it, and they were going to actually show like fire and like bones being turned into weapons or tools of some kind. But they're like, you know what? That's a little on the nose. I think we should lean back at that. And then also they thought pyramid, that's a little too close to like the pyramids of Giza in Egypt. Let's go with something a little bit more simplistic.
yeah.
So they went with just like that sort of tablet looking
Yeah.
shape.
As kind of an offside to this, the thing that enticed me the most about this is kind of the atmosphere is insane.
Atmosphere.
The music is
Yeah.
iconic. The kind of building tension just in the the choral
Yeah.
whatever
They're actually
is it's disturbing almost.
yeah.
Horrific.
And
Yeah.
it's those are all pieces that were made by composers. So it's like I was talking to David about this, there wasn't like a direct composer that created work for the movie.
Well, sort of.
Yeah. But it's a lot of it is pulled from other works.
Yeah.
And so that one specifically that you're talking about was when I was watching this, I think like we've already talked about how this movie has influenced a lot of the sci-fi genre, but also in the use of music and the atmosphere it's building, it's influenced a lot of current like artsy horror films.
Yeah.
And especially with kind of this rising crescendo in choral notes.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I've heard that several times in recent work where like it will start building for seemingly
Do you
innocuous
know which
scenes.
movie you're thinking about? And it is also very influenced by this.
Which one?
Prometheus.
Yeah,
Oh, I brought up
exactly.
Prometheus when
Yeah.
I was watching, which also felt very inspired by this movie.
Oh yeah,
There's
Does that
definitely.
rising
There's also-
choral
the
thing with
Promethean
the score?
concept of
Yeah.
this deity-like thing instilling,
Yeah.
imparting
and you
knowledge
have-
on.
Hereditary is
wait,
another one that
wait,
does
wait
this.
A second, but and you have David, played by Michael Fassbender. David.
Yeah.
And he's the AI who is secretly controlling the
Yep.
operation. Like it. So
Spoilers for Prometheus.
Yeah.
Right.
So one thing I wanted to bring up too on the score, which I think is hilarious, is okay, it's a little sad.
Hilarious.
It's a little sad. Yeah. Anyway, so the original composer was supposed to be Alex North, who worked with Kubrick on Spartacus, and he liked working with him on Spartacus, so we asked him to do the score for this. So North created an entire score for the entire movie, and Kubrick didn't really like it all that much.
So Pirates of the Caribbean had the same narrative with that. Right?
Yeah, a little bit. And so they didn't tell North, and North went to the premiere of the movie and heard whatever they were using in this and was like, that's not my work.
That's sad.
Oh, man, it was so mean.
That's just so humiliating.
I know.
Like,
That is
Yeah.
really sad.
Well, imagine he probably told everyone like, "Oh yeah,
Hey, I
like
scored
I'm
this."
working on this project."
With Kubrick.
You could kind of put this through, I don't know, maybe an elitist kind of lens or snobbish, where Kubrick,
Yeah.
has said on both screenplay and scores is why go something like make something for this movie when the true genius has already been written, like the classical music of, also
Yeah.
Sprach Zarathustra, from Strauss is the
Yeah.
now iconic thing with the original intro with the earth and
Yeah. The blue
I mean, and
Danube.
that itself, harkens to Nietzsche, and there's some overtones, the Übermensch and eternal return and stuff like that, themes that kind of embody this movie as well. And it bookends the movie and the cycle here. But I mean, yeah, those classical pieces really impress the tone of the movie on you, in addition to the visual imagery. And I think the Blue Danube was kind of a coincidence or an accident. It was just playing in the background while they're doing some processing and stuff. And Kubrick was like,
Kubrick
what if
was
we
like, I
use
want
this? And
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that because they were falling asleep, I believe, when they were working on it because it's kind of a slow process. They were all tired, and one of them's like, "Hey, we should put this onto sort of energize people." And
Yeah.
Kubrick's like, "All right, I guess so." Wait a second, I like that.
There's almost this element of organized chaos to his work where he's very, very particular, but he's also very organic about it at the same time.
Yeah.
So he's yielding to things that really work, and he's open-minded, but at the same time he is not afraid to just cut or say no to something. So
he's not afraid to make the tough decision.
Yeah.
For
He
the,
really
for the
he
art.
really sets the structure to a very detailed level and becomes more technically knowledgeable than the technical advisor.
Yeah.
But is also has the creative mind that he, like you said, is open-minded to receive, the creative process on the fly.
Yeah.
And I mean, also pushing the technology. Like he made things happen that needed to be done to, bring things to life. I mean, the images, the beautiful astrophotography, the planet photography of Earth. I mean, from our point of view now, I mean, that's like, okay, we see that image all the time. But consider that blue marble, the iconic first photo of Earth, wasn't until the 70s. So they're literally creating these beautiful, amazing images of the full spherical, nature of the planet Earth and the moon and everything like that before
Incredible.
the public even had seen the real pictures.
Yeah,
Right.
it's crazy.
That's
And
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also do want to talk about the scope of this movie and just how Kubrick knows how to craft something that is immediately an epic. Like, and not just in scope, but also in just storytelling. But specifically scope, he likes to show something in this movie, like a spaceship or someone inside a spaceship, and then zoom out, show how big that spaceship is, and then show how that spaceship is super small compared to this other spaceship.
Grandiosity through scale.
Yeah, that it is going into this ship port, and this ship is huge, and he even inserts all these little people in there to like show, and then that spaceship looks big, but then you see the giant planet behind it, and you're like, oh, that's
in a way
that
this
must
is
be
where
huge.
Star Wars I think got a little bit of an idea where they show the I don't even know what you'd call it, the craft that's flying by. You have the close up of it as it's slowly going by. You see this massive thing, and then it slowly shrinks into space.
Yeah, but it's just it's beautiful to look at. I think when I was watching this, I didn't have exactly in my mind like the year it came out, but I was like, oh, this had to come out like after Star Wars or something. And nope, 10 years before. We already said it, but it's like it is so incredibly ahead of its time, technologically and in almost every other way too. So just
minor fact check here: the first full disc pictures of Earth was '66, not the '70s, but still after this movie came out.
Yeah.
And just like LEDs alone, like all the lighting in this, the sets, the rotating pieces. I mean, we'll talk about it later too. I mean, that's kind of the real genius, is laying the groundwork behind the scenes, the production site, sites, and everything that came together.
Yeah.
But that's why this was kind of so revolutionary at the time, and it's hard for us coming after the fact to say, okay, this is this revolutionary piece, trying to understand that, because we're so used to amazing technology now.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it still imparts that impressionistic tone on you that is still the heart of the artistry.
Yeah.
So that's the first 25 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, sorry, we've gone a bit.
No, we're
Well,
fine.
a lot of that was talking about tone, which I think we won't be.
Yeah. And I do want to talk about Dr. Floyd here. I almost said Dr. Hyde, played by William Sylvester. This guy, he's kind of, and this is literally kind of the Brad Pitt character in Ad Astra, but like they have kind of different purposes. But they're on a mission to go check something out deep in space somewhere. In this case, he's going to Clavius because what the news is saying is that there's some sort of epidemic in Clavius, but he knows that's not what's actually happening. And this is where, like, okay. This is where I'm like I am hooked there, because he got me with the intrigue, and what I realized is I like a good space mystery, like when someone's going when something's like oh, what's that blip over there, we uncovered this picture and that is not supposed to be there, that's not natural, that's man-made, or that's made by intelligent life. When you throw something like that at me, I'm like okay, like I got my hands together, I'm like,
especially when it's a slow burn like this too. You're just like, ooh, all right, I'm set.
Like you have this guy he's on this secret mission, it's his work.
Secret.
It is secret. He's not allowed to tell anybody. Everyone thinks it's an epidemic or whatever, but it's actually no.
Well, people are worried too because there's radio silence from their family that work there and all this stuff, and gosh, and that I'm glad you brought up the mystery aspect of the sci-fi, because another thing about this movie too is, I mean, the sci-fi genre itself, except for a few exceptions, until this movie was laughed at. It was a laughingstock. It was garbage.
Yeah. It was like the exact way people look at fantasy movies, where it's just like, oh, those can't be award worthy. Like, yeah.
So this was completely flipping things on its head, and using sci-fi as a vehicle to explore these themes, that more than beyond just kind of, I guess, the fantastic, I guess. But I had a point. What was I going to say?
I'll say we can circle back to that. But another thing that I noticed about Kubrick is he likes these unconventional structures to his movies, where like he really likes to play around with the medium. You have your 25 minutes of silence. That was probably him being like,
great.
let's see how long we can go without having to say anything.
That's them with
like
radio
just visual
silence.
storytelling.
I thought that
And-
was really cool.
But then the
actually.
next curveball he throws at you is William Sylvester's character. He's kind of positioned as the lead in this movie, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
But no, 45 minutes in, no, he's gone. Like, no, our lead is introduced. I didn't actually do a timestamp on it, but it seems like the lead of this movie is introduced like 45 minutes to an hour in.
I would almost even venture to say there's not exactly a lead. It's more
Yeah.
just a like this is what's happening kind of thing. It's like
Yeah.
There just happens
it's like
to be
an
a guy.
anthology,
It's an implied lead.
It's an Odyssey.
though. Yeah.
an Odyssey. Yeah. Well, I don't know because this is based on the like a couple of mini stories, if I recall.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, you know, here, we're going to touch base with this portion, this group of people. Now we're going to touch base with this group of people and, you know, kind
But
of
even
tell the
sti-
story through an anthology or kind of like...
Even still, though, it is focusing in on one person.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Right.
like you're following that person.
But it's not like they're the lead
I'll-
of the entire movie. They're just
Yeah.
they're just kind of the main character
So-
of this portion.
I will say I feel like kind of what you're touching on is, and AJ mentioned the aspect of this film kind of playing almost like you're watching a documentary. You're just this third party viewer that's not actually part of it. But
a
then
fly on the
once you do meet Dave, there is an aspect of actually getting to know him on a more personal level, so you feel a little more ingrained in the story. And I think that's why he feels like the central character.
And, well, to me, he feels more central to me because the problem is presented to him as a new problem versus him already knowing about it, and
Right.
he has to adjust accordingly.
Yeah.
Versus
Yeah.
the first William Sylvester, who is like he's already in on whatever is happening.
Right.
Like,
Or an aspect of what's happening.
yeah. So you get to see this character change versus
Yeah.
Floyd, who's
Yeah.
I mean,
so rather than like a third party just observer, you become part of his story more
Yeah.
directly.
yeah.
But
Well,
even he's
kinda-
not the main storyline.
Kind of compare it to The Shining, where they're all just, you know, cogs in the entire work. There's not. Sure, there are some cogs are bigger than other cogs, but
yeah.
but
It's all about how you use the cog.
yeah, okay. I wasn't going for that, but you know, it ended up being that way. Anyways, they're all just kind of a set of mechanics in a
Yeah. In
in a
machine.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just one cog makes the whole machine work. It's each aspect
Yeah.
of it is very important in the whole thing.
I think the
Speaking of cogs, that spinning set of the space stewardess, where
Yeah.
she's walking in the whole.
Oh my
I mean,
gosh.
there's so much in
cool.
this production of this movie. Is like that's all I want to talk about. Almost like
So
it's
cool.
fascinating. I mean, it
Well,
immediately learning that stuff ups your respect for the movie.
Oh yeah. And we
It's
can
impossible not to.
we can talk about that scene briefly because I know David has done
Also-
some research on that one.
I'm sure AJ knows everything I know, plus like 1,000.
Can I just remark real quick before we get into that how you can watching this you can understand why some people would think that Kubrick could be behind
Reese
the lunar
brought
landing.
this up to me earlier today.
I was
You
like,
could understand it.
yeah, I was
based
I was
on how
watch-
well this is.
Yeah,
put
I was
together.
watching this, and while I definitely do not believe that the lunar landing
Yeah.
was faked,
Same here.
I was like, if they were to ever fake it, they'd be like, "Hey, Kubrick, what
Hey, Kubrick.
what team did y'all use to make that happen?"
and then Kubrick said, I used 238 different companies. Do you want to use those to fake the moon landing? And they're like,
we got $3 bajillion from the government. Okay,
no, that's too many people to silence. They're like, you know what? It might just be easier to go to the moon after all.
No, yeah, it's a ridiculous notion, but he could do something like that.
Well, the thing is,
and-
Kubrick isn't. I mean,
Yeah.
he's all about being a cameraman. He's all about the visuals and setup. He's not the one doing the actual work behind it.
yeah, that's
No,
why
I know.
you'd have to hire the team.
I know.
yeah, but you see this, and this was 68, and the lunar landing was 69, and it's like for someone looking in on that, they're like, oh, you know,
It just happened to be around the same time, but mainly
Yeah.
because guess what everyone was focused on in the 60s?
the
Space
moon.
race. Yeah.
True, very
Well, the
true.
Cold
No,
War in
it-
general.
Well, we had to beat those Russians.
yeah, true.
All right, where were we before?
I'm sorry, y'all
No,
are gonna.
So we're
talk
following
about-
Dr. Floyd, and
Yeah.
so we have that kind of mystery aspect of it. Everything's hush hush, under wraps. We're trying to figure out what this mystery is.
Yeah. And which part did you end the first portion of the story with? Just so I'm-
Basically, they find the monolith that's uncovered, and it screeches.
yes.
Boy, I had my volume way too high on my TV.
It is alarming. It is when they this is so cool. Another cool scale shot that just looks so impeccable.
One of
when
my
they're-
favorite scenes, I think.
Yeah, in Arena it brings back in that choral music, that upswelling
Yeah.
choral like
Almost
impending
cacophonous.
This
horror.
This is where it feels like a horror movie. Like
Yeah.
this is the moment where I was like, "Oh, this is more than just a sci-fi."
What I really love that the switching back from optimistic to pessimistic
Yeah.
in the musical tones, where it's just like but it's all epic. It's
This kind of leans pessimistic for like the majority of this.
yeah, I don't know. It's more ambiguous.
Nothing
It's-
felt optimistic for
There
me.
was
okay.
no optimism for me.
I think the end is
Except-
optimistic.
What?
Okay, so
Ambiguously, I
Yeah,
guess.
we'll talk about it.
I would say that it's very it's not necessarily optimistic or pessimistic. There is this impending sense of something happening or about to happen. But I find the interesting part about this movie as far as direction of actors is that everyone is very passive about what's happening around them. And it's because like they're used to this.
Yeah.
And that's how humans would be if like we had conquered space travel and we're just there in space. Like there's
Yeah.
literally someone sitting watching a video on a screen. Meanwhile, out the window, you see like this large planet just moving and stars and like something we would think is just amazing and you wouldn't stop looking at.
Yeah.
But for
This
them,
is-
it's like this is just common.
This is and another shout out to Ad Astra that is what that movie does.
Yeah.
Like there's literally like they go to the moon. It's basically
Just another day.
Yeah.
There's a
Routine.
subway on the moon. There's like just people walking about, going to meetings, and like the moon is very well colonized. And
Right.
Mars is still kind of like, we kind of got it.
We got
Right.
potatoes
You know,
over
a
there.
little bit, but
Giving you that sense itself is is an accomplishment.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
all this new sci-fi stuff that could be cheesy and over the top.
Right.
It feels natural. It does. It
Yeah.
feels
Yeah.
like these people are. That's their life. You
Yeah.
know, it's like an every other day.
Which
So yeah, that
different than-
itself is an accomplishment.
Well, and adding to that simplicity where they're not trying to overstep the sci-fi is just the way they dress. Mm-hmm. I mean, the fact is, they realize that, 35, 40 years in the future from when they make this, they're probably not going to be too far off from where we are now. But it's going to be different. Like, what would be an enhancement without being over the top?
Yeah.
So they got rid of zippers, they got rid of buttons, but they kept suits relatively normal, maybe a little bit more trimmed down, a little sleeker. But even with the gear that they wear in space, did they have people from NASA work with them to make sure that they had relatively accurate suit
Yeah, they had
designs?
2 astronaut advisors.
Yeah.
To make sure that they and what I thought was cool was the advisors were even talking about how they tried to help make sure that it's slightly futuristic beyond what they could do, but also keep it in reality. So I thought that was really cool. So that's another Kubrick hiring more people to make sure this is making a truthful interpretation.
Do you know another really great like tightrope that Kubrick walks with this movie is showing people behaving casually like this is just another day, like we're talking about,
Yeah.
but also how this is where the slowness of the movie works in its favor, where it's holding on these shots
Yeah.
for a long time, just watching people go through their procedures. Like, we as an audience are like kind of in awe, while these people are just, it's another day in the life but yet it still appears as you're watching it just grand.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
Like we're allowed to kind of linger on these shots because he knows this is the first time we're seeing this, unlike the characters in this movie who are like, they see it every day.
Right.
So it's a kind of wonderful balance. There's times later in the movie, and we'll get to it, where I'm like, okay, cut to the chase. Let's go.
There's a couple parts.
But in the first like first hour stretch of this movie, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying these lingering shots.
Wasn't the
just
first
'cause-
hour just blackness, though?
Well, I think the composition of this film, as far as like its setup, is very much like, you know how they always say Star Wars is a space opera? This one is like a space ballet, you know, where you just have these moments where you're just watching spacecraft
Ooh, I
kind
like
of
that.
dance through space, and accompanied with this music, as well as these shifting characters that move on and off screen. It's just, it's very much experiential with the way a ballet is. Like, when you think about the storyline of a ballet, it's usually pretty simple, but it's more about like the tone of it.
dramatization.
And yeah, exactly. So
That was what Kubrick was about.
yeah.
That's very good description.
Yeah. All right, so we end on the monolith emitting the very high-pitched noise, knocking out our astronauts there, or what are they called? I don't know what they're called.
Cosmonauts.
I almost said the Russian word, cosmonauts, but no. Yeah, knocking out the people. You don't really know if they've passed away, but we get a card that says 18 months later, so that's kind of left ambiguous. AJ, you want to carry on with the story there?
You got it. 18 months later, aboard the Discovery 1, Dr. David Bowman and Dr. Frank Poole are en route to Jupiter. Also aboard the spacecraft are 3 scientists in hibernation sleep and the cutting-edge AI integrated with the ship, HAL 9000. HAL predicts the imminent failure of the ship's main comms antenna, so Dave goes on an EVA, extravehicular activity, to replace the module preemptively. Upon testing of the unit that was predicted to fail, though, no fault can be found whatsoever. This apparently indicates an unprecedented error on the part of HAL. As HAL's role is so intertwined with the ship's function and their mission's operation, Dave and Frank only become more anxious when an identical AI unit at mission control on Earth contradicts HAL's prediction. Cautiously, the 2 astronauts privately discuss their contingent action in the event HAL becomes further erratic. However, they were not careful enough in their speaking privately, as HAL is able to read their lips through the EVA pod's porthole. After deciding to verify whether or not HAL's prediction would have been correct, Frank again goes on an EVA to reinstall the original antenna module. Suddenly, Dave sees an untethered Frank's body careening away from the ship into oblivion. Dave hastily takes the other pod out to try to rescue Frank. Meanwhile, HAL terminates life support on the 3 hibernating scientists. Dave, having recovered Frank's body, returns to the ship, but HAL refuses him entry, declaring that it is for the good of the mission. Dave manually rams his way in and hard drives it over to HAL's logic memory center. HAL pleads with Dave as his life flashes before his eye in reverse order. Dave dismantles HAL's memory modules, who gradually devolves from brilliance until he is so dim. Suddenly, a video plays in which Haywood Floyd explains the true purpose of the Jupiter mission.
So AJ, I get the feeling that this is what you and I thought the whole movie was going to be, pretty
Right.
much.
Yep.
Yeah. This middle section. I just love the just 180 this movie does, where it's like, okay, that character's gone. Now introducing, sorry, the name escapes me, Keir Dullea as Dave. Normally in a movie, I would be frustrated that I'd have to reset and learn this new character.
Yeah.
And like, okay, now I have to go through his whole routine again, and like, oh, it feels like we're starting all over again. But no, I was just like, oh, give me more of this. I love seeing just the setup of their lives. I love the establishment of HAL 9000. Like they show the there's like an interview that they have that they had done pre-mission or during the mission. I don't know when it was.
Yeah.
But they're like, oh yeah, you know, we like HAL. It does a real good job. Kubrick does a real good job with exposition in this movie. Like giving you that exposition in a way that feels natural and not forced, and having this like round table interview with these astronauts or whatever. So just giving you an idea of what HAL is.
Well, also the weird part of you are watching this on a screen where there are these astronauts or these guys watching themselves on a screen.
Yeah.
You know, it's just this weird kind of moment where you just think about it. You're like, this is really strange that I'm watching this. But also the fact that the way those scenes are set up, like I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, is that a mirror? No, it's just they're mirroring each other. Like even the angle of their pads is like they're mirrored. So especially also when it would cut to the screens where HAL is, I was like, that looks like it's mirroring. No, wait, it's not. It's just, that's the whole room. It just looks like it's a reflection, but it isn't.
And another thing
I love that set, the whole walking down the room. I mean, it's amazing.
I think that's one of the other iconic scenes that I always remember too. Like him jogging around that loop.
Yeah.
I was waiting like once he got towards the camera to see him kind of like move out of the way of the camera to keep going.
Oh yeah.
No, they did it pretty well. It was pretty seamless.
Yep.
These cameras are using film. Like this is not digital. Like so they got these bulky. Like they're handling film for all these spinning like machinations and everything. It's crazy. So
I have a question for you, AJ.
Yeah.
Because there's some things I didn't get into that I wanted to. But they obviously used miniatures for a couple of the big set pieces, right? You have the big space station, the circular space station, which looks absolutely amazing when it's in space. The fact that it's rotating and creating perspective shift. I mean, it kind of throws you for a loop because up to that point, I'm sure you didn't have that. But why is it that they did that with some things and not others? And did that bother you? Do you know?
No, so the lighting is what is actually the limiting factor there. So, I mean, the pinpoints of the stars, and I mean, how the stars track too is just, I mean, if you look at the background of things, has some intentional choices there. They actually shot those stars, I think, through two different exposures, two different apertures, where some were very blown out, some were, very dim. So they combined those and merged them, so you get kind of the amalgam of both of them. And so when things move, they move properly in three-dimensional space without being too bright. They wanted to control the lighting on the miniatures and obviously not look like it's floating on a string, which they did really well. And I know he used some of those parts where they wanted to have kind of slow motion and speed up the film. Like they had to get special motors and stuff to handle the film at that fast rate without tearing the film. So a lot of it was basically exploring new technology and the methods of using that to bring his vision to life. And some of it was just like, they couldn't overcome an obstacle.
Probably unforeseen that we may or may not think nowadays would be an easy solution. Like the fact that they had the space station in a actual miniature, which because it looked so well, I was wondering why they did that with that one, but other ones they had cutouts, right? They had cutouts that moved across, and it doesn't have that sort of parallax shift that we're used to.
Yeah, so some of those cutouts were superimposed so that they could do, like I know earlier on the moon landing, that was actually stationary, and they moved the things like the background and stuff around it, and when they had that the composite effect, you wouldn't think the things that are moving, and what created that effect. So it's just kind of the creative workaround all around.
Yeah. And a lot of the scenes, too, to create that perspective, too, is like they had the matte paintings with the planets and stuff, but they had it really zoomed in or really zoomed out, depending on the sequence, and then they would zoom in or zoom out while they move some of these pieces. So it's weird because if you're really focused, there's not a lot of perspective shift. But you don't you don't notice it because of how well they integrate it. So it gets a little
it never seems flat though. And I mean, one thing that really describes this movie is smooth. Like everything is so smooth in this movie. Like that's what I think. If it wasn't so smooth, it wouldn't win successfully. It would feel like it's cheaper or low budget. But the smoothness of it and how it's delivered, how it came together with all those, especially experimental composite techniques. I mean, that could go poorly. I mean, I'm sure that things did go poorly and just didn't make it into the cut, but it's really a credit to all forces abound that put their work into that. And the sound design too. You talk about the score and the impactful score of those classical pieces, but the lack of sound, and then you have the diegetic sound of him breathing, and then the absolute total silence of space, which is how it really is in a vacuum. Like just that eeriness, like raises the hair on your arms because it's quiet and you just hear almost yourself as if you were in that helmet breathing and nothing else. In space, no one can hear you scream, whatever that line is from, but like
That's
this
Alien.
makes you feel that. Yeah.
Yep. So at this point in the story, we have caught up with both Dr. David Bowman and Dr. Frank Poole. You get the sense that these two are kind of the two that are awake during this interim, whereas the others are in their hibernation sleep or whatever. So they're the ones who are kind of keeping things running on this ship as they make their way towards Jupiter. And Hal is he is, as they've explained, the basically the nervous system of the ship. Like, it can feel everything. That's one of those things where I was like, I would not try to say or scheme anything.
Oh, yeah.
With, like, if Hal is this in touch with the whole ship. He is the ship, basically.
Yeah.
But whatever. So you get the sense that there's kind of this shaky relationship between them and Hal, even though they say, like, oh yeah, we love Hal. Hal starts to kind of make some weird calls, and they start to get a little uneasy about it.
It's a little tricksy.
Yes.
Well, I think the big thing, and I think we would all feel that way, is if something is perfectly infallible, it's never made an error in its life, and there's no way it can. But it's also it's intelligent, and the fact that and maybe it posed the question in this before many other ones that leads to a whole genre of movies. But the issue with AI,
Yeah.
Right.
and I thought that was one of the coolest things in this is the AI in this being Hal is lying to them about something and it's like, sorry, I made an error. I know that's kind of weird. And my bad.
And that's how amazingly forward-thinking this movie is.
Yeah.
Can I remind y'all, computers barely exist at this point. In
Because
history.
they're like, but what if computers run
in
everything?
like a personal computer sense. But so this Hal here as an AI passes the Turing test. What that is, if you don't know, is if you can't distinguish a conversation with this machine from, if you can't distinguish if it's a machine or a person, then it passes the Turing test. In simple terms. So this AI has gotten so advanced that, like, he's playing chess with it. Like, it could win, obviously, every time, but it's programmed to only win 50% of the time, so they don't get discouraged.
Yeah.
But, and then you have, what is human consciousness? Like, can this AI be human? And later on, when Dave is pulling the plug on it, like, he's like, more broken up about it because is he killing something that has consciousness? And is it the whole lying about the nature of the mission that fractured its conscious, that broke it, that to give it this supposedly evil nature, which, on a superficial level, like, okay, Hal's the antagonist, he's the bad guy. Like, if you're in a thriller movie, you survive against this killer robot trying to kill you. But on the flip side, pull yourself out of that, put yourself in, like, kind of a backseat objective documentarian observer thing here, and look at Hal's point of view from a human consciousness and his development. Is he human, and is that consciousness, is that why he broke? Because of his lying and that forced corruption.
Well, also, he's holding a secret.
The question is, holding that secret. And about the weapons and everything, does the tool make the man or the man make the tool?
Yeah.
But Kubrick is his brilliance is he doesn't tell you. Like, he gives you all these things laid out in front of you and invites you to explore them.
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of think that this movie has to be watched multiple times, because if you're watching this one time, all this stuff you're not going to go into depth on. It's too much to absorb, too much to even think about, because it can be a boring slog if you're not in the right mindset for it.
Headspace, yeah.
Yeah.
So
You do have to give a lot of credit not only to Kubrick for this, but also Isaac Asimov, who was kind of headlining the AI front in his books, like The Foundation, iRobot, all that.
Well, Arthur C. Clarke too. I mean, with the story itself, and if you read the book, it basically has the complement of this movie. This complement is the photo negative, the impressionistic image, and then the book itself has all the details and goes into this in a logical method versus the, I guess, visual method.
Right.
Point being, though, is that, like, while this is the first time you'd really seen it on TV, the concept of an AI and exploring that venue was not the first time you ever saw it.
Oh, right.
They had other great works, like books and such.
Movie form too.
But
I just think it brought into sort of more of like a public
but
conversation.
This did kind of revolutionize it in film for sure, though.
I'm just saying, this and what you're talking about, it's only been in the past 20 years, at least I could be completely wrong to my knowledge, that society as a whole is like, AI could maybe be a problem.
Yeah.
Don't like.
I would say they actually
The
longer than 20 years.
singularity
This is a
is
prime
possible.
example.
No,
That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying this is so forward thinking.
Isaac Asimov wrote iRobot in like the I don't know,
but
like
that's my point.
50s
Is
or something.
they're so forward thinking.
Yeah.
There's this lapse in time where we just decided, like, let's keep developing this as far as we can go. You know, like.
Yeah. Well, AJ kind of brought this up, and I didn't actually think about it all that much until you did. The fact that the AI isn't necessarily evil. I mean,
it's not.
The byproduct of the situation that it was kind of forced into.
No, it's been given a command.
Yep.
And it will.
And it broke it.
No.
Or like, no, it broke the sentient mind.
No,
I guess,
it will try to see the end result of that command at whatever means possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, because remember, Hal is saying, "You'll jeopardize the mission if you disconnect me," or whatever, and he's that was the cool part when he kind of starts pleading.
Yeah, that was weird, man.
I do want to
cool.
shout out some of these actors, though. So we got Keir Dullea as Dr. David Bowman, Gary Lockwood as Dr. Frank Poole, and of course Douglas Rain as the voice of HAL 9000. Maybe the most iconic part of this movie. That voice alone, coupled with the image of the red light, just right up front in the screen.
Yeah.
Like, I think these actors do so well is, I don't think, when I'm watching them, I'm like, those aren't actors. Those are people doing a job. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm watching them, they're doing, like, there's no line where it's like, hey, I'm saying this movie line and I'm winking at the camera. Like, it's
because
never...
it's not dramatic. And it is dramatic, but it's like the way they wrote it was supposed to be real, not heightened drama.
Yeah.
And it's dramatic because in a real scenario like that, like, shit hits the fan. Like, like, when his friend is kind of shot out into space, he doesn't freak out. Like, he doesn't have this, like, oh my God situation.
Yeah.
He just knows, like, I'm going to hop into action and I got to save him.
Mm-hmm. And these people don't... The most impressive part is these people, or these actors, don't act like they're being filmed. Like, yes, they look good on camera and they're progressing the plot through their actions, but none of it seems like, I don't know, artificially inserted in there.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know. Yeah, so both Dr. David Bowman and Dr. Frank Poole are like, okay, we got to talk about this HAL problem. They go into this pod, make sure that HAL can't hear them. But of course,
their lips.
HAL, for some reason, they're stupidly leaned in right in front of the window, in front of the red dot, and HAL reads their lips. It's a computer. It figures things out.
Well, also, if it was lying to them, it could also just not respond, pretending like it couldn't hear.
Yeah, I was thinking that the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. And I will
You have
also
to
say...
put yourself in their shoes. This is unprecedented. Like,
Yeah.
AI is new enough where they don't really have it figured out if it's human or not, but it's still, like, to the point where they're putting their whole lives in a trust on
Yeah.
one-way trip to Jupiter, pretty much, like on this machine that is going to be 100% infallible. That's what they expect it to be. This made a mistake. Like, they're like, what now? Because everything's out the window.
I would have maybe used a pen and paper. That would have been my, like, hey,
that's probably good.
here, I'm going to write this on my palm. Here you go. Check that out. But, yeah, so, and what provokes them doing this is something has happened with their signal. They are, there's a problem with the antenna, and soon,
Supposed problem.
in 72 hours or something like that, they might lose contact.
Well, yeah, so the supposed failure of the antenna, just the premeditation of this, the aspect of Hal's betrayal, and really even then is, did he actually predict it failing, or was it the plot? And that question's never really answered. But yeah, so that brings about it kind of subtly hints the question that's talked about more in a lot of other sci-fi is the isolation of man, especially the space craze, being isolated in space, being so far away from home, where if they're out of communication with Earth, then they're like by themselves. And so they really do kind of converse with Hal as if it's another person because they have to. And Hal may be that way himself, whichever. And also their betrayal of Hal overhearing them planning to pull the plug could be the trigger of why it performs these murderous actions in self-defense.
Right. Yeah, I'm of the belief that I don't think Hal caused the initial problem, because I think they're on that mission for a reason, and Hal is given this secret, but they are still, I feel like, needed for whatever this is. But maybe that's just Kubrick again being like, hey, you can have your own interpretation of whatever.
Because we don't ever really even are explained why there are 3 other scientists that are in suspended animation. I mean, they kind of say, they'll wake up when they get to Jupiter, but it's not like,
it
why
is
are they
weird
all
that he
asleep
kills
now?
them.
Yeah, but that's
weird
a
that he
deliberate
takes
act of
them out.
malice, is that like pulling the life support.
That was pretty dark, to be honest. That when you see that it shows like the cardiovascular and metabolic rates, and it's like computer malfunction, you're like, oh,
Hey, it's not dark, David. This is a G-rated family
Frank
movie.
just flying out there, like, that was violent. Like, all of a sudden, like, holy smokes.
Can I just go ahead and say, and I know that no one else is going to agree, but I thought that was the funniest point in the movie. I thought it was so funny.
I did not get that at all.
No, it's more the way like Frank just kind of gets yeeted across the screen. You know? And
Dave
he's
is
like, whoa.
chilling and working, and like he kind of looks out the window, and you see this body fly by. It's like, wait, was that Frank?
That's awful. I saw it as a horrific moment.
Oh, no.
I was laughing.
It's definitely horrific, but it's just kind of like, oh, well, there he goes.
Oh, there he goes.
Yep. But the thing is, when you tell me that, I could see why you.
Oh yeah,
It came on in the background again, and I laughed.
The way abrupt violence can be kind of funny sometimes. Yeah. It's more like just startling and throws you off. Yeah. So then you just you kind of react with laughing.
Yeah.
But but definitely like every time.
R.I.P. Frank.
Each time there's twice this happens, but each time they go out to check on that and possibly replace the battery or figure out what was wrong with it, each time I was like, "You're gonna die."
Irina was
die.
when Frank went out there. Irina's like, "Well, he's dead."
So this is when I will say, like, I am very positive on this movie. I'm going to go into a bit of a negative here.
We got to be honest and real.
Yes. So I love how long this movie lingers on things, just because it's like the movie knows that this is the first time we're seeing something like this, and it knows it. It's like, okay, take it in. But I do not need to see someone work on an antenna for 30 minutes. Like, that is not exciting.
But that's real.
No, yeah, I know, and we're watching these procedures. But for me, all of the lingering slowness of this movie has been
elongated.
It has been
and it could have put more towards the little bit more stretched out suspense of the cat and mouse between Dave surviving and coping with
Yeah.
being alone against Hal. I agree with that.
Yeah. And usually these long, slow, lingering shots are in anticipation of something. And I know there was supposed to be some sort of tension leading up to like, oh, he's going to die. I didn't really get that from the initial time they go out there. I just, to me, was watching someone slowly make their way to the outside of the ship, slowly make their way to the antenna, slowly pull something out of the antenna, slowly make their way back into the ship.
Slowly go back out
Only
again.
to be like, hey, there's nothing wrong with this thing. Let's just put it back in. And I'm like, all right, cool. But
well, it's more like, hey, this thing
Well,
doesn't seem to be broken,
good thing
and then
it
let's
looks
check with
beautiful.
mission control.
yeah.
I did get a little bit of a like this movie's feeling itself a little too much.
It was in the zone. It really were.
It had me for kind of the first, I guess 3/4 of it, and then the last quarter, I was just what?
Oh, well, we'll get to the last.
It was like perfectly abstract, and it was exactly what it meant to be, but it was just kind of
So
What?
apparently there was the first screening of this movie was something like 20 minutes longer or something. And
really.
yeah, so he took out 20 minutes from this movie, and actually there is a ton of footage on the cutting room floor of this movie. Apparently it's like thousands of hours or something. Like I don't know exactly, but it was a very like there was so much footage. But yeah, there's a 20-minute longer cut of this movie, and I imagine it is more of people just walking around doing mundane things. Like
No, they actually had a whole other antenna sequence where they had to fix it a second time.
there's 2 antennas.
I agree, and that was definitely my biggest flaw with this movie was. My natural instinct is to say pacing, but it's not pacing. You're right. The pacing is actually not bad. It's just like you kind of like tapping your foot a little bit, and you're like, come on, look, the intermission where it shows intermission on the screen, where then it goes into
Is
another.
that what that was?
Yeah, and then it goes to another 2 minutes of black, and you're like, look, man, I don't think this is helping the movie. Now, there are going to be people out there who defend that. I'm sure there are lots of people who love 4 minutes of black screen because
I kinda like it.
It adds tension, maybe.
I
don't know.
appreciate it.
I appreciate
Give me
it.
time to go to the bathroom.
Yeah,
getting old.
that's what intermissions are for, I
I'm just
guess. But it just didn't work for me. And who knows? Like, there are people out there who, like, if you told them there's a version of this movie where these scenes are drawn out twice as long, there's going to be people out there who think that's even better than this. Mm-hmm. So it's all a matter of what you're into. It's just not exactly my cup of tea all the time.
I understand.
And also and we'll progress a little bit. The amount of time it takes Dr. David Bowman to retrieve the body of Dr. Frank
Oh
Poole
my gosh.
is like, oh my gosh, just get him
Yeah,
already.
but-
like I'm like,
At the same
already
time,
dead.
weirdly, one of my favorite things is watching him actually grab onto him because
Oh, that
I was
was
trying
cool.
to think like how did they make that look?
it looks like
so
a real body.
real?
Yeah, it looks like a real, and maybe I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how they did that.
I didn't have time to look it up, but
Tommy.
I thought someone might have.
It is one of those scenes though where you see the dot of his body out into space, and judging by what we've seen so far, you know we're going to endure every single second of time that it takes to get to that body.
I'm pretty sure.
I don't give a damn.
I'm pretty sure I like turned to David while we were watching like him careening off into this
His limbs
just
flailing.
space. I was like, oh no, he's too far away. Go back. Like it's just he's gone.
No, the second you see him out there floating, you're like, sorry, bro.
You're done.
I was like, there's
bro.
no way you're gonna
well,
get
his
to
the
him.
little pipe with his air's out.
Yeah.
I
You
know.
it's just like
He's dead.
I guess there's an
So-
importance on retrieving the body for the family, I'm sure.
yeah.
and,
I think he kind of knew
Well,
he
it's
was
also
dead.
the.
Oh yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's supposed to instill a little bit of, or shed some light on Dave's internal, what's going on with him, like panic, okay,
Right.
now Hal's like flipped the switch and like things are going down, and now it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like keep saying, like retrieve, like respect human life, that kind of stuff, like hope against hope, that kind of thing. So
Right.
balancing all that is probably what the internal dialogue is in Dave's mind.
Yeah.
But I think we could have used, instead of some other drawn out scenes, and used a little bit more what I would call cat and mouse of him playing these games with against Hal, and I know I know, but they're still
I could have used
not
more of
really
that.
tipping their hand. Because in the book it's a little bit more that way, and he actually tries to wake up the three scientists all at once to help him out, so it's not a 1v1 against Hal.
Right.
But here it's just like all at once. So
Well,
yeah.
well, also the fact that like they set up these two characters as Frank was pretty much convinced that Hal was compromised in some way, while Dave was still kind of like, yeah, but he is this robot that's supposed to be infallible, basically. Like they haven't had a mistake. So Dave was still kind of that logical mindset, while the other one was paranoid and suspicious. And so once he's gone, then it would be fun to see like Dave mulling it over, and then kind of coming to the realization like, yeah, there's something wrong here before. But in this moment, it's kind of just thrown in his face like, yep, Hal's compromised and now you're stuck out here.
Yep.
So
And that's maybe
I agree. I would like to see a little more back and forth.
And this moment too is we just endured a whole bunch of just waiting for him to retrieve this body, but at least we were rewarded at the end of this with like this great moment of tension between Hal 9000 and Dr. David Bowman. I'll just call him Bowman.
Or Dave.
Yeah. But yeah, we get this great like exchange between the two of them where it's like, oh, you know what I know, or no, you don't know what I know, or I know what you know what I know.
I know you know that I know you know.
That's what I mean.
If they had more of that, when he's pulling the plug on him, I think that would have been more impactful.
Yeah.
Dave is like trying to not break down and like, am I killing somebody, or like consciousness, or destroying something, as he's pulling each memory module. I mean, and then Hal is like pleading for his life and devolving.
Yeah.
Really, and I think that would have been more powerful.
Yeah.
Right now, in my opinion, all of the impact of that scene is because of the cinematography, like the red wash and just the vision of it. But I think if there was a bit more character depth presented, I think that would have been something to improve on here.
Right.
Yeah, I still really like. I find the quote unquote death of Hal 9000 to be very off-putting in a weird like it's so like I have such conflicted feelings
Well, it's
about it.
also
Where,
this very casual way of someone saying, "Stop, stop. I can feel it going."
Like it's so, I thought it was perfect the way it's just slowly deteriorating.
Well, it's like you can almost hear a real person like screaming that, but it's being translated through a robotic voice. So that scene, like as soon as it started happening, I felt conflicted. I was like, but wait, don't.
Hey,
And
Hal
I think,
didn't
like,
feel conflicted killing people, so...
Yeah, but, well...
Or did he?
It's complicated. But I think one of the things I liked that they incorporated into that scene was that while Dave, he's like set on doing this, like he has no hesitation, he's still going. But near the end, some of its original programming is coming up to the surface, where it's like, he taught me this song. Would you like to hear it? And then Dave says, yeah, I would like to hear it, kind of a thing. Almost like a comforting thing,
hey,
where it's like,
I'll
as
give
it's
you
dying.
this last thing, like, put you down easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well, it's almost goes through the like stages of grief, where I mean he's bargaining, and you've got the anger, like denial, isolation, depression, like it's all embodied in that one thing, and that's kind of where it grazed the line of consciousness, AI, machine, human. These memory modules are physical things he's pulling out, but he's going through these developments from machine to the naturalized voice, the cadence, how he teaches those things. I mean, it's too distilled, I think. I think it would have been, maybe this is a modern sentiment, and I don't know, but I think if Kubrick pushed harder on this, it would have worked.
And I think
not that it didn't work now, but it would have worked more.
Right. And I think to answer our question on the question on whether Dave considered him to be conscious or like sentient or something real, like him answering and saying, yeah, I would like to hear that song. That is a very human response to a request. And it was accepting that maybe that's something that would comfort it, as it was going. So it's just kind of a very interesting moment to incorporate there, where even though it would have hit harder if we had a little more in this space. But even just unpacking that one line could mean a lot. So
something that I was wondering as well is the fact that he obviously, like you said, was going through the stages of death, grieving, sort of bargaining. I'm wondering what would happen is if at that stage Dave had so much, remorse that he kind of goes back and puts his memory back in. Would Hal just go back to, the mission and, try to sabotage Dave?
No, definitely not. He'd still try to kill him.
Okay,
I think he'd see him as a liability to the mission.
He almost killed me.
I think this is literally Hal just going through his programming. What's the best route to get back to where I was before, in the advantageous position? Because it's a computer. It has a mission.
Well, this is where we're juggling the AI aspect of it. Like, he doesn't want to die, and he's doing what he can to protect himself, but it does sound like he's actually afraid of dying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's because it's artificial fear, where it's just like it is to.
But that's the question.
I don't know, man.
No, I think it is to try to reach out to the human side, where it's like it's trying to appeal to a human's empathy. Where it's like
it depends if Hal broke through that barrier, though. That's the thing and that's what we were wondering the whole time.
You can go through a whole mind trip on this whole question, because then you would go on to think. Yeah. But if you're talking about a robot or AI and saying, oh, it's not real, it's artificial, like this is an artificial programming so that it won't want to kill us or harm itself or, all these other barriers. But when you think about from a biological standpoint, we are all programmed genetically to do the same thing. So it's like, does that mean that what we're feeling is authentic, or was it just programmed into us by something else? So you can keep going back.
And along with that, I'm just going to throw this symbolism out there, but I'm going to pull a Kubrick and not make a determination. I'm going to let you think about it. We all know Kubrick loves his colors of red and green. So we clearly have the red eye of Hal, and Dave also has his red suit. Frank had his yellow suit, which is kind of neither here nor there, and he's already gone. But then when Dave comes back, he puts a green helmet on. So you have this contrast of the green on his head, where your thought processes are, and then the rest of him is red. He goes within the heart of Hal, or his brain, which is red. I think all those things are intentional choices that Kubrick makes, and they visually pop on the screen for sure. It makes for good imagery. But also I think there's something those are evocative colors for sure.
Secretly a Christmas movie?
Well, I think we talked about this in The Shining, and if you ever watch Eyes Wide Shut, there's it's very strong in that movie as well. Kubrick flips green and red on their head, where traditionally, or at least here in our culture, we would say green is a color of life. Trees, grass, things growing, living, organic things, and red is like anger, all that stuff, hate, but Kubrick always pairs green with death. We talked about the bathroom scene in Shining.
In Shining. Yep.
And then, like I said, with Eyes Wide Shut, there's a very evident scene there. But I don't know. I think it's really cool, interesting how he uses. He doesn't use a wide color palette. It's just very strong, vibrant colors, and it's effective.
Primary colors too.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay,
and
so
wait, I know we brought it up in The Shining, by the way. But in terms of the way Kubrick uses colors, green is very representative of death, correct?
Right.
And this is where we start seeing a little bit more green.
Well, he was just saying that.
I mean, like, I know he talked about the helmet part, but I mean, it goes even farther after
Have
the
we?
sequence.
We haven't even talked about
Well,
gone through the third part.
So I was
yet.
going to say, so as Hal shuts down, dies, what have you, we see this video of Haywood Floyd pop up from the beginning, basically explaining their secret mission, why their mission is going to Jupiter in the first place, was specifically because of the monolith they found on the moon. And as that shrill radio frequency burst happened, it coincided with another stronger signal originating or pointing towards Jupiter. And so that's why they're going to Jupiter, because if there is other sentient life, then going in the direction where that signal is going is probably their best bet of figuring it out or finding the next breadcrumb at least.
So
this is also where this deviates from the book a bit, because in the book the setting is their destination is Saturn, particularly one of the moons, and here it's Jupiter. Not that that's a huge deal, but that was actually a change that Arthur C. Clarke made on the fly because of new things that their team found about Saturn's rings and stuff that are really cool. And so they liked that from a stylistic point, but the movie production was so far along that making that change would have been too much to change.
Right.
So they stuck with the original Jupiter. So that's why that difference exists between the book and the movie.
Do you think that they originally would have gone to like a moon near Jupiter? Because being a gaseous planet, it seems kind of weird to use Jupiter.
Well, I mean, all the large body planets are. I mean, Saturn is a gaseous planet as well. So, but that's also, I mean, sci-fi, especially newer sci-fi books, are exploring home worlds where, and actually, if you ever read, actually, this is a movie I wanted to cover in this series, but couldn't really make it fit. Solaris, not the original, not the George Clooney one.
The Tarkovsky one. Yep.
The Tarkovsky one, yeah. I mean, both of them are based off the novel. That planet is all kind of gaseous or fluid, but yet they find a sentient life there, and so it's kind of a. This is actually why I chose this sci-fi series. Was one, because of Solaris, also because I read Project Hail Mary, same author as The Martian. So that kind of got me on the sci-fi kick. That's what led to this whole me choosing this sci-fi theme for this run.
Hey, AJ, before you go anywhere, because of this miniseries, I bought the Solaris Criterion Blu-ray.
Good.
To watch as a companion to this, because I heard that Solaris is actually kind of a response to 2001.
Yeah.
Because that Tarkovsky thought that it lacked the kind of like, I guess, humanity,
Right.
or it lacked a soul.
That's actually a common critique of Kubrick work.
Yeah. So he made Solaris. Which is...
Kubrick had a lot of not respect for, but people describe him as a nihilist. Like Nietzsche. I mean, as I said, also spoke Zarathustra, which is basically like a Nietzsche's one of his most famous books. But it also talks about, or goes into Übermensch, the oversoul, not going transcendentalist, but or I don't know. You can Wikipedia that, but it touches on this point, and then also the eternal return, which this story definitely has, this kind of cycle of life, rebirth, that kind of thing, which we'll talk about later. I'm going on a tangent, but yes, Solaris is. Maybe we'll do a Patreon episode for Solaris.
There's even an argument you can make to include it because there's a remake. I know it's not a sequel, but there's technically multiple Solarises out there.
Yeah.
So back to that clip of.
So yes,
I lost his name.
Dave?
Not Dave.
No,
Dave is in the scene, but the clip that it was shown
that
to
played
clip.
right when Hal is
Hayweather.
Yeah,
Floyd. You think that could have been? Well, there's a theory to be made that was like the last bit of good that the AI was trying to do, like complete the mission. here's this video. This
Take
is
the
mission.
video and complete the mission because
Yeah.
I am not going to be here to do it.
Yeah.
Instead of an automated protocol.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's
I
definitely
was
some
wondering
ground
why that was
that could
playing,
happen.
and I was
Yeah.
the two things I was thinking was either it was that, like you said, it was
The last-ditch effort
Hal's
to-
last ditch effort,
Yeah.
or B, it was pre-programmed that if Hal went down, that it would automatically
Yeah,
play.
those are the two options.
Yeah.
And my sentimental heart likes to think Hal was
Come
like,
on, Hal,
this is the last
redemption."
bit of good. Here
That's
we
a
go.
good point.
That-
And that I'm glad you brought that up because that's another difference in the book where after Hal is gone or his higher functions are stripped out, the still base functions to make the ship run are still kept intact.
Right.
Dave then contacts Mission Control on Earth and they discuss what to do, where to go from there. And that's when they tell him, okay, here's the true story of why you're on this mission. And in the book, this mission was a one-way trip. And they were going to send a Discovery 2 to try to recover them years later, but they knew that it could be, the end of them, a suicide mission, so to speak.
Yeah.
Here you don't really get that, but they did. So Kubrick or Clark and whoever wrote this scene clearly made that choice to have this pop up right coinciding with the demise
Yes.
of Hal. So yeah, you may be onto something there.
Yeah, it's definitely intentional whether you're wanting, it's intentionally ambiguous, but it's to leave open that question of, did he do that? Or,
It's a good way to let the audience sort of come to their own conclusion.
yeah.
And that's something that there was an interview with Kubrick where he said it so eloquently that I will not be able to say it, but that's what maintains like the intrigue of this movie, where when something is left ambiguous, that's what is more satisfying to an audience, even though they think what is satisfying is getting the answers.
Yeah.
Like it is much more satisfying to speculate, but
Yeah.
but our brains tell us that is not
There's-
more
But-
satisfying.
But you just have to know what questions to
This is why
to
Lost.
speculate
This is
about
why
the right
Lost
questions.
succeeded as a show.
Yeah, but the thing is, yeah,
And then
and
failed.
lived in
And then
ambiguity
failed.
and failed because they gave you what you thought
exactly.
you wanted.
It is always that little
Blade
breadcrumb
Runner.
of, yeah, exactly. Like
The origami.
the speculation is what makes it fascinating and interesting because the answer is never going to be what you imagined it to be.
Yeah.
like it's and you imagine it to be like the most like mind blowing thing ever. It will never be that because guess what? A human thought of that idea and you could have thought of it.
Oh,
Like,
that's
it's
why I
like-
brought up Solaris.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
a core theme of that book, that story is you don't know what you don't know. Like we
Yeah.
can't even comprehend things outside of human comprehension ability.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's a nice segue into the last portion of
Yes,
the
I can't
story.
comprehend this last part of this movie.
Yes.
All right, so I'll
you
get
want-
on with it here.
Yeah.
After accomplishing this Herculean task, Dave looks to Jupiter where he is thunderstruck to see a large black monolith. Dave seemingly is pulled into this Stargate, where he experiences a laconic but visually extraordinary trip, presumably into another dimension. Dave ends up in a Spartan room where time seems to skip. He sees himself and subsequently becomes himself in several stages. First as aged, then aged again, eating dinner, then upon his deathbed, and finally newborn again as the Star Child in the presence of another monolith. This Star Child Dave travels Homer at last and looks upon Earth.
Whoa.
Yeah, mind blown. And it's David Bowie, turns out.
And it's also it turns out to be the intro to what's that? We talked about it earlier. Dang it, the alien Prometheus.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very Prometheus ending.
And yeah, my brain didn't articulate this as well as a YouTube video that I watched. But I really do subscribe to the theory, and it's not exactly a theory. I think Kubrick said it too. But that this movie is about evolution almost, where it is starting
A
from,
metamorphosis.
Yeah, it is starting from ape. You see the monolith. And it's also about extraterrestrials because Kubrick was fascinated with this at the time.
And AI.
Where it was like aliens and AI, yeah, and all that stuff. And that was like really intriguing to him. And he is a known atheist, but he was also open to the ideas of gods or why people would believe in gods. And his solution to that was there could be like a higher being that is much more evolved than us that appears godlike. And that is this monolith. And the monolith, and why I think this movie is optimistic, is that the monolith, I think, is trying to assist humanity. It is trying to get us up there. Like, it's trying to catch us up.
It's trying to get us past the filter.
Yeah, because every time it shows up, it's like it's a monumental moment for humanity. And yes, it knows that there's going to be violence, but the end result will be something positive and something like the Star Child, as they call it, which I didn't know that was what it was called. I had to read that. But yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm talking about the end.
So
we start with the trippy Stargate sequence.
Can I just go ahead and say that this is such a cool sequence, but leading up to it, I was a little confused. And maybe one of you can clear it up because I remember because I checked.
No, I don't think so.
I can, yeah, maybe not. But I know what happens because I went back and checked. It's him. He watches the video that explains the mission, and it shows him there, and then it cuts to black, and then it's him on a spaceship, and then it goes through this trippy sequence.
Yeah,
and
I
you're
wanted
like,
to see like how'd you
what
get
happened?
There? Yeah,
well,
what happened?
I mean, if you're really wanting to simplify it, it could just be his life flashing before his eyes.
Could be. Who knows?
If you really want to simplify that, he died in the vortex, and then this is just,
No,
that's the brain. No, that's simplifying things.
Right.
That's not necessarily what you're supposed to glean from this. But
We're supposed to marvel at
there's-
the pretty colors is what we're
yeah.
supposed to do.
It's
Yeah,
just
so basically,
Yeah.
it skips to him, making it into Jovian space or Jupiter's area where the signal ends, and then the monolith is just in that area.
It's like a coincidence?
Well, that was the destination, and so his whole encounter with Hal, we either just skip ahead in time or that all occurred very close to where they were going to be anyway.
Yeah, it's really hard to know.
Or it could be, with each monolith it teaches something, or there's some progress made. This could have been that next step to another heightened plane of,
And I was wondering that too.
whatever.
Did they break through somehow?
Yeah,
maybe this
it
is
could
where
have been.
some of that footage is from the film is missing. Maybe there's something there that shows that gap.
That might have helped.
And it might have been taken out because it's like, we don't need that. Like, what
Who
we
cares?
need in this movie is like, hey, now this is what's happening. We have the
need-
monolith that is about to have another intervention with humanity.
They were thinking, how do we get the people on LSD to go really psycho?
Actually, funny you say that.
That's
one
what
of
the critics said at the
Yeah. This movie was like it had like not the
It's a
best
trip.
opening at the box office, but it was lingering, and they decided to keep it in theaters for longer because a bunch of young adults were sticking around for this trippy sequence and high on psychedelics, just enjoying it, and that was like the word of mouth for this movie. At one point was just like, it's such a trip. You gotta just
stick
this
for the
is-
ending.
Like take
One of the leading
drugs right
critics
the
at
last.
the time, basically dismissed it as basically that's why it was successful, is because hippies wanted to just go have whatever giggles they could get at the end of the movie, and that's kind of the Hollywood, the contemporary Hollywood scene at the time wasn't was in contrast with the European art film style, and this obviously isn't in keeping with the Hollywood style at the time.
Oh yeah, definitely not. I
Yeah.
think as far as this whole trip goes, I really do enjoy it up to a point.
It's long.
Yes.
It's really long, but I think a lot of the it looks like a lot of helicopter sequences flying over terrain that has been kind of modified. Like there's a different filter on it almost,
Yeah.
and some of them are pretty cool. Others, I'm like, I don't know where we're going. I'm kind
Right.
of this just looks like regular Earth terrain, just with a different lens on it. Whereas like I had been bombarded with impressive visuals just before that. So
You know-
then leading up to that moment, it didn't feel, I felt kind of tired.
You know, there is another movie that does this almost exact same thing, and that movie is not nearly as good as this one.
Does it have Matthew
but-
McConaughey in it?
Yes, but that
No,
moment is done much
I'm
better.
not having this. Yeah, I was going to bring this up earlier, but I love that movie, so I'm not going to have this fight.
Hey, before you say, I actually do really like that movie. I just don't think it's as good as this one.
That one
And it's
also
actually
pushed the
grown on
envelope
me.
technologically. It had the first depiction of a black hole that actually turned out to be like scientifically accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, you tell him, AJ.
So
And it has
cool.
a black guy, like monolith creature AI.
I like how
did.
we've been talking about this. We haven't even said the movie.
Interstellar.
Interstellar.
You said it.
There you go.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about that sequence one last time, by the way.
Yeah,
that-
yeah.
Well,
because mainly from the aspect of creating it. Because
Yeah, the process of it is what fascinated me about it, and it seems like it's an exposition of that technology, and David's going to tell us what that technology is.
I mean, you seem very excited, and you're welcome to do it, and or jump in and fill the gaps if I don't quite get it right. But when I was watching Corridor Crew break it down, which is kind of my go-to for CGI or practical effects, apparently that's a relatively simple method that they use, but it's very well engineered, and it's one of those ingenious methods that we don't think of nowadays to get something like that. Where
Well, so there's two different parts. So are we talking about the very first part where he's going
the very
through
first part,
okay.
which was basically you see sort of the colors coming at you, and so what they did for that was they had a camera hooked up to a dolly that went forward and backward, and at the end of that dolly's platform, they had sort of like a big barrier with a slit going through it, so the camera could only see through that slit. And then on the other side, they sort of had a sort of moving background that they had all these colors flashing by, and the camera is filming that slit where it can see only a few of the colors. And as the camera's zooming in and moving on that dolly, it creates this effect on one side where it feels like it's coming at you, and the colors are flashing by, and then they would reverse that and do it on the opposite side and kind of brighten up those colors, and it created this trippy effect. And it was something it wasn't new when it was in this, so I think it's kind of cool of how he utilized it to create sort of a spacey, time warpy effect.
Yeah.
I mean, it's truly one of the most iconic scenes in this movie.
Well, it's called slit scan photography, and Douglas Trumbull was the one that adapted it for that method for this purpose here that we see it in.
Yeah. So cool.
I didn't
And
even know the name.
I actually like all of that stuff. I think I am in agreement with Irina, though. Once it gets to that helicopter footage,
Yeah.
I'm like, and you see his blinking eye like a little too many times. I'm like, okay, I get it. You're having fun with your colors and they're changing.
Yeah.
And but
While we're doing that first part where he's going through that, and then we kind of cut to Dave, and he's like kind of shaking. Those
Yeah.
stills were inserted to cover the end of the dolly motion, so when it goes back and forth,
Oh,
there would be a
interesting.
jarring effect. So the stills are inserted on those frames to basically transition between. But also Dave, the actor, he's actually like shaking his body physically.
cool.
That's not like a camera shaking. So that was him
so it's
actually
just both
acting.
assisting in the effect. That's cool.
Yeah, I like that.
And so then after this, we see Dave in his little pod or whatever he was in, and he's in a room. And he sees a man who is older than him. And the man notices him, and then he's gone, and he is now that older version. It is him. So this is so creative. Like, I love this, where it's like, you're just seeing this passage of time in a way where, like, he catches a glimpse of his older self, and then you're in the body of the older version.
Yeah.
And the other one's gone. And it's just this exchange that is
Yeah.
so well done. I
But
thought.
also the older
Like-
one being aware of the younger one's presence
Yeah,
in
and-
the same moment.
And in another YouTube video I watched, like, this is the construct that the monolith has created for him in a way of, like, shepherding him into, like, almost the next stage of humanity, where it's like, hey, this is like, I got the sense that this was like they made up this construct for him to kind of be like, okay, this is something I can kind of relate to as I transition.
This
where it's like,
Rococo-themed room.
Yeah. What did y'all think about this part?
I think this is...
Green,
Yep.
green.
Yep. You're right.
There's, it's definitely like there was a switch that was flipped during the movie where like you were watching one kind of film at first, and this kind of happened in The Shining, and we were talking about it too, where like in The Shining, it's basically when Jack goes into the room 237.
Oh, yeah.
And it feels like the movie changes a little bit, you know, where everything before was a little more realistic, but now it kind of turned into a bit of a trip.
Yes.
This one as well, like excluding the whole visual experience he goes through, or mental visual experience, this part felt very different from the rest of the movie.
And that is what I love about Kubrick. He is so not afraid of just completely turning things on their head at the snap of the finger.
He does what he wants.
Yeah.
And this set itself, I mean, it seems like it's uplit, which gives it this eerie vibe. And then you've got these up or downward angles on a lot of the shots, but also like just the art on the walls. He had replicas, like detailed, like very high quality replicas made of actual works of art.
Yeah.
And they're just in the background because all the things were important to him to establish, I guess, this tone of familiarity or this lingering familiarity underneath the surface that's still throwing you off because of those jumps of point of view.
Can I say
I
too
wish
that
it transitioned better from the different colored photography, which kind of felt like just an exhibit of new technology they experimented with.
Yeah.
And they threw in too much footage of it.
Yeah.
Like, it's cool to learn how they did that, but it didn't fit in the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah. And also, Noah, I don't know why I didn't think about the green in this scene,
Oh, yeah.
but I think this is like the most significant use of green.
Oh,
in
yeah.
Kubrick's
There's
career.
a lot.
But like usually he associates it with death, but what comes after this, like green also means growth and life. So it is like the ultimate use of green.
Could be like the
Yeah.
end
It's
and
like
the
that.
It's also
beginning.
pale green
Yeah.
blended with white.
Yeah, where it means both. I think
Yeah.
in this case, it means both. Because of course he ages and then he is this new like embryo or the star child or whatever, and the obelisk or the monolith is there, and then then we're at the ending scene and you get that theme comes in again, that classical piece. I don't know what y'all said.
The Blue Danube.
Yeah, there you go. And
No, was it the Blue Danube on that part? Or was it
fact
also
check me.
Zathura?
I'm not. I just named it. I just guessed.
Classical piece. There you go. That's the one.
Gosh, this baby's off-putting.
yeah, but that
Zarathustra, yeah.
yeah, it plays, and for me, and some of y'all think this is negative, but for me, I took it as a positive, or at least that's what the movie wants you to think, is that this is a positive development. Like, we have attained the next stage. We're at the next level now, and this child is going to make its way to Earth and change things for the better, progress to the next step.
It could be positive.
Well, I got something that supports you there. So you remember our very first that big cut from the spinning bone to the satellite?
Yeah.
And I said those satellites were actually like nuclear bombs, and then we see a couple more of them from different countries. And that's like this threat of existence that humanity's in now, like the weaponized, like just devastation that's lingering there. When the Star Child's overlooking Earth, none of those satellites are there. None of those bombs are there.
Oh, they're all gone. I didn't even notice that. Interesting. So, peace. So what were y'all's thoughts on the ending of this movie? I want to hear, like, what's the negative take? Like, if there is one.
Weird.
I think it's. Well, I guess.
very weird.
The negative would be lack of humans' control over its own destiny.
I was gonna say this. this whole movie kind of just seemed unbearably bleak, and just kind of like I don't know. I just got a sense of hopelessness, I guess. Like, so this is all we amount to, kind of mentality.
Yeah.
Is we're gonna become this embryo, or
Well,
You know, if you
the negative side is that I could see, Noah, is that we wouldn't have figured this out on our own. We needed this monolith to help us.
well,
So-
I mean,
Like that-
there's that too, but
So we go
I don't
from
know.
the beginning of this movie, no dialogue. Middle of the movie, dialogue, but conflict. End of the movie, no dialogue, no conflict. I think the lack of dialogue is where it hurts. I get the impression of it, like tonally, but not identifying with Dave through these transitions is where it leaves. You know, like I think Noah, what you're trying to express is the bleakness of it is. So what is humanity after all? Like, what did Dave
Yeah.
just experience? Like
Yeah.
we can talk about it, but we're not putting ourselves in his shoes.
Yeah.
And the book kind of goes into it more where we have, you know, we're privy to his thoughts and his realizations as he experiences all these totally new sensations and things and inverted skies and everything else. Like it extends some of that instead of just these kind of jumps that are at the end. So I think that the shuddering like transitions, like right, especially we go through this big trip that was overextended and then just have these jarring transitions and then it ends like that. That's why
Yeah.
I think that negative pit of your
My-
stomach
my-
feeling lingers.
I like to
Sorry,
think.
no, I interrupted you. Sorry.
no, you're fine. You're fine. That was pretty good. You put into, well, you explained kind of my sentiments very well.
I like to think, to play for the positive, I like to think that I think the monolith or whatever this species is, they were not the original intelligence. I think something helped them out, and something helped that thing
It's
out.
almost like we're all
And it's-
getting to sort of portray what we think about this movie without them actually telling us.
Yes, but then
I
this,
can actually
this-
tell you.
Yeah, and then humanity now is at that level where they will seek something else out and help them out, and it's all this like this
cycle.
descending thing of like, hey, we all gotta just help each other get to this level, and to me, I'm like that's kind of cool, and in I think that's positive.
Let's reach out to AJ.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, it's true for everybody what you interpret on this.
Boom.
From the novel's explanation, so the monoliths are actually tools left behind by, forget what the books end up calling them. I think it's only in the third book that they're actually named. But this more advanced species, they basically come upon Earth and see the species there and leave these tools to try to probe them. So like if you remember when the monolith first appears, they all go kind of in this frenzy and start doing random things. Like it's basically testing each one of their limits and what their skills are and what they can do. And is a catalyst to them like evolving and developing. And then so the one on the moon becomes activated once it hits the sunrise. So that's like, okay, so they've reached this benchmark, and then it puts out this signal to the Stargate, which is at Saturn in the book, Jupiter here, that then brings them to this higher level of consciousness up to them, where they then encounter kind of where like the pinnacle is. And I guess in the books, the species has gotten so far where they've shed their physical bodies and made their own, like all sorts of different variations. And it's kind of abstract a little bit, but
Maybe there's a baby in those monoliths,
yeah.
and they just fly around in these little stone things. You're like, ooh, that's a good planet.
That's a good planet. I'll
Maybe.
settle there.
Probably not.
Yeah.
All interpretations are accepted.
This movie's great.
But
I'm
yes,
just
you're
gonna say
right.
that.
I think this movie goes back to the tonal impression of like he gives you this information that creates this discussion point for you to think about it. In my opinion, it's hard to do when this last little leg of it is like, what? Like I was
Yeah.
along for this ride, and then it's like I get you're trying to impart this last like glimpse of abstract, but it's too jarring and doesn't
Yeah.
connect, especially for something that's quote unquote got a lack of a story. Like you fill in the gaps of the story yourself. Like that's not something you can do on one watch of this movie. If you watch it several times, yes, but this movie, like the continuity of that third act, the transition or lack thereof is what hurts it.
But also,
I think Kubrick is better enough to like understand that you still have to, like, you can take this highbrow approach and have these very lofty thoughts and ideals and abstract artisticness of it, but you still have to kind of have this base entertainment or some kind of story structure to deliver that, to be a vehicle for that.
Right.
And I don't think he was successful there.
I also think, though, that we are having the conversations that he would be happy that we're having. Like,
Good.
whether
Yeah, I agree with that.
Whether you liked it or not, like, he was like, okay, good. This is provoking thought. This is like, these people might not have liked it, but they're thinking about it critically. And we're having these conversations about what it all means. And was this a right choice or not? Like,
maybe we need to become babies to fully understand.
I mean,
Newborn
like
babes.
there's a whole spiritual aspect that I'm sure a bunch of people have talked about. Where like,
he just
your
Trojan
baby
horsed it.
form was the purest form.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the sterility of this movie, because of Kubrick's
Surrealism.
touch on it. I was going to say sterility because it feels very sterile. It's very neutral.
Oh, you said
feeling to me.
sterility?
Yes.
Okay, I thought you said like surreality.
I mean, it does feel very surreal at times.
Hey, I want that word to exist. Surrealism.
Surrealism is surreality.
That's a Kubrick. That's how you would describe Kubrick films.
Portmanteau.
It's the thing is, because of the way he films things, it feels not just matter of fact. It feels detached. It feels sterile.
Cold is the word.
Yeah. Well, and the point being, I don't actually think cold actually works.
Dude, all of his movies feel cold.
I think you're thinking you're sort of attaching cold and detached, because sometimes those are synonymous. In this case, I don't think so.
No, I do not feel detached. I feel it is.
Well, let me get to my point, which is, I don't think it's a positive or negative ending. I think it's just a matter-of-fact statement of what's happening, and you get to sort of project what you think that is.
The irony
placement
in
of the
sterility
music
is that it
is
does not equate babies.
What?
Look,
Sterility means zero babies.
Yes, well, sterility in the case that I'm using it means detached.
No, I know what you mean.
there are two big musical pieces in this movie. Okay, not minus the like classical ballet type whatever that thing was. Like you have the ascending theme, like the dun dun dun, and then you have the choral descending theme into darkness. And I think it is a very intentional point that it ends on the ascending theme.
Well, the ascending theme is always played when it's actually showing space. They don't actually play it.
No, it's played during the ape sequence with the when they finally hit that next level.
Yeah, but it always is a transition into space. Whenever it's in space, it's always
No,
the
they play it
optimistic.
during when he's on his
Okay.
deathbed.
I have
when
another
the
theory.
Star Child. No, I agree. No, like that the Strauss piece definitely imparts that positive uptick.
Yeah.
I have another theory. The spaceship to Jupiter is like a little sperm, and the vortex is like the egg, and Jupiter's the egg. And then once he like goes through there, it's like fertilizing the egg.
I don't like these
and then
hand
it becomes
movements.
a baby.
Noah is doing these hand movements while he's
wasn't
talking
thinking
about
about it.
impregnating Jupiter, and I don't like it.
Anyway,
There's a big floating baby in space.
Yeah, I
that
can't
could
deny
be.
Nietzsche.
That's how we actually get into sort of the Greek mythology. That's a son of Jupiter.
Yeah, we just
thing is-
Trojan horse that conversation in there about the Odyssey.
I hope no one takes this seriously whenever they hear that.
No,
and think I actually think.
don't tell people. Let them come up with their own conclusions.
I'll leave it ambiguous. I might or might not believe it.
we could go on and on about what this movie means, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
Do y'all mind if I give a brief rundown of all the movies that would
Inspired by
either
this.
not exist or would be significantly different if not for this movie?
Go right
Are you
ahead.
trying to influence our
Wait.
scores?
No.
Do you want to do that in the franchise talk portion, or
No, I'm just gonna do it right now.
oh, okay.
Okay.
Before we close
Apparently
out.
we don't
just
have a
felt
choice
like
in the
it wasn't
matter.
connected
No.
to the story, so that's why.
No, I just want to, and I will cut this out if it doesn't seem natural
Okay.
when I'm editing. But I just want to emphasize how kind of influential this movie has been, just to close this out.
I think we all know, but
So we got Interstellar, obviously. And I want you to imagine a world where these movies don't exist. Okay?
go.
So I got Interstellar. So both movies have like wormhole stargates. Both are about saving and progressing humanity. And they have that just, both really have that trippy...
All right, Reese.
What?
Are you going to give a long explanation like this for every movie?
No, don't worry about it.
Interstellar.
We have Arrival. We have Denis Villeneuve's Arrival. You got your monolithic spacecrafts that want to save humanity and help us out to help them out. So that's also similar. We have Contact. We have Moon, a movie that... no, we're not going to talk about Moon. What am I talking about? But that's got the
we are.
OAI... I know. I was just...
Oh.
I didn't want to spoil it. No, you're good. Tron Legacy, the set design is very inspired by 2001.
Man, I would not have guessed Tron.
No, there's a... Not in the like action sequences, but whenever there's a room that he's staying in, it is very much influenced by 2001. Star Wars, obviously the sets and the use of spacecrafts and the design of the sets. C-3PO wouldn't have existed without 2001. And George Lucas stated it influenced his making of Star Wars. AI, artificial intelligence, obviously that was a Stanley Kubrick movie to begin with, passed on to Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg was massively influenced by Stanley Kubrick. We also have Sunshine. Danny Boyle stated huge influence from 2001.
Almost
Ad
included
Astra. Yeah, we got Ad Astra. It's also a journey into space. Like a show depicts what a near future would be like if we progress to space travel. We also got Wall-E. Very much influenced by 2001: A Space Odyssey. There's even a AI in that movie with a big red dot that just
Goes bad.
goes bad. Yep.
Yep.
We got Solaris, obviously a response to 2001: Space Odyssey, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky. That movie is regarded, it is won awards, classic.
All right, we got to watch it
in many
soon.
ways. Yes. Blade Runner 2049, another Denis Villeneuve movie. Definitely talks about AI, and this one's connection is more to the sound design of 2001, where there's these extended moments of silence where it just lingers between the moments of action. Also have Gravity. Alfonso Cuarón, hugely influenced by 2001 and Stanley Kubrick. And just to be funny, we got History of the World Part 1, which has that ape sequence. So
There is
I would
one
say The
other one.
Martian.
Oh, yeah, The Martian, yeah.
yeah, this is not all the movies. I just cherry-picked.
No, you
Some of
said
them.
all the movies, so I expect
You
you,
did.
to say all the movies.
We're taking it literally, man. You know which one
I
that
want my money
popped
back.
into my mind, though? Was Passengers with
Oh, yeah, there you go. That's right.
Jennifer Lawrence
Chris
and
Pratt.
Chris Pratt.
What
which-
would we do without that movie?
Think about it. I mean, well, the weird thing is he kind of wakes up on a ship, and then they have all these people in cryo chambers. He wakes her up. They're kind of just getting through there,
No, you're right.
debating. Yeah, there's a whole thing.
And also, obviously, Prometheus and Covenant.
Oh, yeah.
Ridley Scott was hugely influenced by Stanley Kubrick in 2001 as well. So, do we have any final words on
Not
the
to
story
mention the
before we...
technological techniques that are,
Oh, yeah.
now standard practice.
Yeah, directly helped Star Wars out. Like, I don't think Star Wars would be what it is without 2001.
You're welcome, George Lucas.
Yeah. All right, any final words on the story before we move on to the next section of this podcast?
I didn't expect to watch a giant floating space baby. I don't know.
But you did.
I did.
It's on the cover
All right.
of half the title art.
All
Or is
right,
that
with
the
that
second
said...
one? I can't remember.
With that said, let's close out the story portion. On the other end, we'll talk about, or we'll get into our brief reviews with numbered scores, get into some box office, talk about what critics thought, and close out with a little bit of franchise talk. So we'll see y'all then. Welcome back. let's talk 2001, A Space Odyssey. David, you've got our scores in a bowl there. You want to pull them at random?
I think I can. Alrighty, first up is... If I can open it. I can figure this out. Alright, Irina with a 9.5.
Oh, dang.
I think that's pretty fair. This whole movie is very thought-provoking. So much conversation to be had about it. I actually never had a problem with the long sequences where they're either working on the ship or outside of it, but I think the only thing that I would really nitpick again is already what we've pretty much talked about throughout the course of this film, and it's the whole Hal and Dave situation where I don't really get enough of that, because throughout this film you've kind of built up this suspense and intrigue over a mystery, which is resolved in a very short amount of time, considering that the rest of the film takes so much time showing you these space scenes and everything in such detail. So that bothered me a little bit. Otherwise, I'm fine. I can look past it. And then the visual sequence, particularly gliding over a bunch of landscape. I think that one just felt like it was indulgent and not even as impressive as the other feat that preceded it.
Indulgent is a really good word.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to use in my review. I was going to say it's kind of self-indulgent, and I was like, you took the words from my mouth.
And I mean, there's not really too much of a problem with that in some films. Like, it's their creative work. Okay, you can do what you want with it. But for a movie where it feels like they're trying to show you something a little more important, it's almost kind of insulting. So I would dock points for that for sure. The ending I do really like. I'm intrigued by it. But with this kind of build up with Dave, I almost don't feel it as strongly as I could have if there had been a little more time focused on his dilemma and who he is exactly in this whole scheme of things. That's pretty much it. I think I've already said a lot about how I feel about this film, and it's definitely an experience and something that people should put on their watch list, at least to watch once in their life. I think I could say that about a lot of Kubrick films. So 9.5. Stick it with that.
Alrighty, stick it with that. Next up, Noah with an 8.
Ooh, I know that's probably going to be controversial, even an 8. But I say this is a thought-provoking movie, and it's really well thought out. It's also probably exactly what he meant for it to be, and it's a masterpiece in its own right. However, I guess it's just not exactly my taste, because while it's really fun to talk about and interesting to think about and dissect, ultimately I just feel a little empty at the end. And then there's a weird little portion with like everyone said before, with that kind of trippy
warp sequence,
helicoptering over
sequence,
everything,
yeah.
Stargate, and like Irina said, it's a little indulgent. I don't know. I guess just my taste involves a little more character, like y'all said, a little more heart before, or like in the form of characters. I like a little bit of heart and a backbone or an emotional backbone to the story. And I know this is just like specifically meant to not have that, but it's just more my taste to have it, I suppose.
That's totally fair. I actually don't blame you for that at all. Yep.
And I think 8 is actually really good, considering the fact that this isn't the kind of movie I gravitate towards. I'm more into adventure stories and
this is
stuff like that.
Definitely a little less of
I
a
will
Yeah.
say this is an adventure, but it's not in the vein that.
It's
not the adventure genre.
It's not an adventure story, but he is going on an adventure.
I think
of
actually one of the
sorts.
taglines for this movie was that it's a grand adventure.
Well, that's a very poor
I would
tagline.
say it's more of a mission. A mission is a little different from a.
Okay,
an
here's the
adventure.
tagline on the poster: an epic drama of adventure and exploration.
Man, adventure
guess.
just doesn't fit.
Yeah.
It's like technically you're right, but it's just the genre. When you think of adventure, you think
Not this.
sailing the open seas to find treasure or
Going through the jungle.
going to the jungle. Yeah,
Going to your home island to save your wife from suitors.
yeah. There you go. You little Odysseus there. The original Odyssey, but
Are the
Yeah.
bombs circling the planet the suitors? What?
anyways, yeah. So I'll stick with my 8.0. I think you got enough hipsters out there giving this accolades. So
And they are.
yeah,
And film critics.
yeah. And they're right in some aspect, but
Well, everyone's allowed to
you
like
know,
what they want. You know?
exactly.
And I think me piggybacking off of you is great because I am up next with a 9. And I think Noah and I are on similar wavelengths. And I had a hard time ranking this because of the fact.
Is that like a radio wave or
Like
same frequency, perhaps?
Yeah, like
one that might shoot from the moon to Jupiter.
Yeah. Well, we need it's like a super low frequency radio.
I'm
wave.
Jupiter because I'm just a little bigger.
Then I'll be the.
Just a little bit stupider.
Yeah, we could keep going forever.
He's got a lot of gas.
I do have a lot of gas.
So, like
No, these dogs do. They've been farting all
They
evening.
sure have.
Sorry.
like Noah, I also this isn't my cup of tea. This is not my kind of movie, and this is where I had trouble ranking it because objectively, it was exactly what it wanted to be. And it's meticulous. It was innovative. It did everything you think that a perfect movie should do. I just didn't care for it. It's fine. It's okay. And
9 is okay.
yeah, well, I gave it a lot of points for the fact that it did what it wanted to do and it broke boundaries. I just didn't like the movie all that much.
It gets a technical 9.
Yeah.
Those are respect points.
Yeah, it's a lot of respect points because
Yeah.
I don't want to watch this movie again. I'm sorry. I know that there are a lot of people who, like AJ said, you have to rewatch to get more. And maybe if I muster the courage to want to watch it again,
courage.
It's like
it was an endeavor,
you're
man.
going into the den.
It was
of
an
a
endeavor.
lion.
I almost fell asleep a couple times. I'm not gonna lie. It didn't have me engaged through some sequences. Some sequences I was extremely engaged. It was off and on, and so
It did have like primates in there, so that's probably what awarded you at least 7 points.
I like monkeys. No wait, that's Reese.
They're hairy.
Wait,
Like,
but these primates didn't have white hair, and they
Yeah,
weren't big.
no.
And they weren't
And
throwing
what-
footballs.
They weren't throwing footballs. Come on.
Not good enough.
Yeah, that's fair.
Of course, David scored Mummy 2 and the Dragon Emperor a 7 out of 10.
And I'll never live it down.
Continue.
Yeah. So I had a hard time disassociating this with Tree of Life, and Tree of Life is another movie that I respect. I think is a perfect movie by the standards they set out to make. I just don't care for it. I don't like it. I like the conversations it provokes. That's great. Don't want to watch it again. It's a boring movie. Sorry, Brad Pitt's meh. Like I don't know. This is maybe I'm just not sophisticated enough. But a 9, I'm giving a lot of respect points to Kubrick because he's a kick-ass director. So I'm just gonna go ahead and leave it at that before I take off too many other people.
no one's ever
lots of
called Terrence
respect
Malick
points to
accessible,
Kubrick.
so.
Let's see. Next up,
Terrence Malick actually doesn't have a lot of big money movies, but continue.
yeah, that was probably his biggest one, honestly.
Thin Red Wine.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right. Next up is AJ with a 9.5.
Hey.
All right, so same score as Irina, and pretty much verbatim what she said. Like, early on, we said I kind of wanted to see what I expected more, or Reese and I expected more of the story of on the ship, the suspense against Hal, the cat and mouse, and broaden that in length, and then kind of you can have the Dawn of Man sequence and have the reincarnation, if you want to call it that, at the end. But gosh, the lack of transition into that trip, the psychedelic colors, is a mistake. I'm just flat out say Kubrick made a mistake there. I mean, you have to have some kind of story structure there. That is 10 minutes long. 10 minutes. And David said he almost fell asleep. I did fall asleep during this movie.
Yikes.
I tried to watch this movie a few times, the last few weeks, and I've been tired, granted, but that part of the movie, that psychedelic trip, I woke up here and there and this is still going on. I thought it was a fever dream. This is still going on. What is going on with this movie? I'm in love with the background of the making of this movie, the production, the technology, pushing the envelope of technique, and all that stuff. And that's what really, honestly, if I have to be truthful, props up my respect for this movie and how much lasting effect it has on the industry, and the art, the craft as a whole. So that's why I'm giving this as a whole, all things considered, such high scores. But I'd be down here with Noah. I would be bored by this movie if I didn't read the book and know so much background about the making of this movie. I would not make it through this movie, and then I would be upset by this what the heck is going on psychedelic trip. I know there's expectations going to this movie for this to be a masterpiece because it's so talked about, so heavily influential, and I expected to give it a 10, but also be reluctant to give it a 10. So this is just me being honest. Most of my respect for this movie is the making of the movie. The end product of the movie itself, I wish had been done differently. There are a lot of excellent things. Mainly, I wish there's a bit more story injected in there. You can still have the impressionistic aspect of it. And it sounds like I'm being heavily critical of a movie I just scored a 9.5. I mean, it's all there.
You have to lay out your criticisms to
because I think I
put your
reviewed
little
during
fence
the main
against
body of the
the
episode.
10 people.
Yeah,
It's funny that
I gave most of my review during the main body of the episode, so this is most of my critiques, and it really comes down to that just jarring psychedelic sequence being too long and just misplaced. I get
the first 3 quarters are amazing.
Yeah, I get you're trying to do an exhibit of this technology that you experimented with, and people brought this cool stuff to the table. Mix it in with the slit scan printing, slit scan photography. You can have that stuff, but connect it to the story a little bit more. And having read the book, the book is a perfect complement to the movie. So I recommend everybody read the book, the novelization, while in addition to this movie, because they complement each other very well. You get the one artistic, emotional vibe from it, as well as the explanation, which I think both of them need each other. And maybe that was their intent with Clark and Kubrick putting it out as they did. But I know the movie definitely has more, what's the word? Renown, I guess you could say. So 9.5. It's excellent technically. I think some things could have been done. Some decisions should have been done better for a more fluid. Well, I don't want to say fluid story.
streamline.
Yeah. And honestly, what I mentioned earlier about the smoothness of this movie, there's this aspect of silky smoothness of this movie that is, I don't know if I've found it in any other movie. It's intangible, but it's there. So that also is really a big part of this movie, the quality of the movie. So I thought I should mention that. 9.5.
There you have it.
And last but not least, we have Reese with a 5. Oh,
Yeah, I hated
sorry.
it. I'm just-
9.5.
Dang, I'm the negative Nancy.
No, like that. Yeah,
good
I'm
score.
glad actually.
I have-
that
what's
one
weird-
I had no
person-
issues with
You
your
know
score.
what's weird is everyone else's review has sounded like an 8 from the way they
Yeah.
said it, but
Mine
yours
was
the only
only
one that
8.
was actually
No,
8.
that's. I think that's why I'm glad there is an 8. You know.
I think mine sounded worse than an 8 the way I
Yeah,
was describing it.
So here's what I'm gonna try to say, and I'm gonna try to like sound more positive while saying some of the same things that y'all have been saying.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. That I understand exactly where you're coming from because I feel the exact same way in certain ways.
Yeah.
I think the highs of this movie are so high that they pull up the lows of this movie to where you still feel good about
yeah.
giving it a
That's
accurate.
very
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
score.
For sure.
Yes.
Definitely were some highs with that psychedelic trip.
Yeah. This movie for me does a lot of things that I love that only sci-fi does. And I'm a big fan of like I was raised into loving fantasy, so I was always on the side of like medieval fantasy, like that's what I love.
Right.
But I've been kind of warming up over time to like sci-fi. And what I love about sci-fi is when it gives you like an intriguing idea that you haven't thought of before, where it's like, oh, there's life outside of Earth, or there's something going on here. It's like real fantasy. Like it's fantasy that we perceive it as fantasy because we have not technologically advanced to that level to understand it.
Right.
You know? And this movie does that. And it also has that mystery element where it gives you this little breadcrumb of like, oh, there's something out there. There's other intelligent life. But while also having all this symbolism and all this stuff to say about humanity. So it's very internal at the same time as being very external. And that's what the best sci-fi does. Where it really like, I don't know, sparks your imagination. And this movie sparks my imagination, and
Right.
it just I'm in on the adventure. It is an adventure, Noah.
No,
Just so you know.
I was.
No,
They say it's an adventure.
yeah,
Oh.
they say it's an adventure.
It doesn't
Yeah,
feel like an adventure.
But yeah, it's got a great mystery to it where I'm like I'm on board with like what they're trying to discover. It also doesn't give me an explanation to that, which I love. It's something you don't think you love because your brain wants answers.
Right.
But it's smart in the sense where it doesn't give you that answer. It lets you think about it. And every aspect of this movie is like letting me think about what it could be and making me understand. I've never quite understood this until now, where it's like that is better than knowing the answer. Yeah, this movie it really made me think in a way that I hadn't thought before. And I'm not saying it's perfect, because it definitely has those scenes where I'm just like, okay, you're working on the antenna. I get it. We don't need to see every single slow motion in space step to go get over to the antenna to then pull something out of it. Like, and we said it already, the movie is indulgent. It is very indulgent. I think there is a hour and 45 minute cut of this movie that is more of a masterpiece than the masterpiece that we have. And I've also talked about this. I don't think a masterpiece is always a 10 out of 10 movie. It is yeah, I do think this movie lingers on things a little too long, and it just takes its time, and in some ways that is in service of it in a good way, and in some ways it is a detractor, and that's why I'm not giving it a perfect 10. But still, I do think that there's so much in this film that is unique and thought-provoking and just really sparks the imagination and makes me just think about things that, like, I will watch this again. I will watch it again just to try and just understand it better and find new things out about it. It has me intrigued. And,
I'll do that by looking it up online.
okay, well, good for you.
I
That's
think
you.
you'll get more out of it.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll stick with my score there.
All right. Crunch those numbers, AJ.
All right, we have a group average of 9.1, and that puts 2001: A Space Odyssey tied with Prince of Egypt and Django Unchained.
Interesting.
So I brought that down an entire 0.4 points by myself.
By myself.
Respect.
Yeah, that's right. Hate me, you Kubrick fans.
Let's see.
What'd you give The Shining, though?
A 10.
Boom. They can
Yeah.
suck it.
Hate me tomorrow.
Were you
We've
going to
got
say
a
something else?
lot.
I made a Blue October reference earlier today. Is the ocean song, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
You're being recorded.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding. Andrew's about to say something. AJ's about to say something. Oh, I'm to edit
I can't
all this.
remember. Well, I wanted to take a quick poll of favorite Kubrick movie.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, The Shining. I think The Shining.
Shining is stupendous.
But I like a lot of them.
I need to watch more because I haven't seen Spartacus. I haven't seen Eyes Wide Shut. So
No, I
Oh,
haven't
Eyes
seen
Wide Shut is
Spartacus.
good.
No, I
Spartac-
haven't seen Spartacus.
Eyes Wide Shut is weirdly high up for me. I love Eyes Wide
no,
Shut.
You like culty things.
Well, it's-
Eyes Wide Shut
I
is
think
really
it's-
good.
I think because Eyes Wide Shut is an example where he doesn't overindulge and he tells a very like simple, straightforward story in the most effective way that he could. You know.
And also, he does that ambiguity thing
Yeah.
in that movie as well, where
Oh, it's
it's like, what was it really all about? Was this
Yeah.
was this sex cult really something truly evil with all like
Yeah.
roots going deep into all sorts of conspiracies, or was it just like a bunch of rich people getting naked? Like,
it felt very organized and streamlined. So it's a good
I
film.
think what
Well-
you mean is orginized.
So the Outlier is actually my favorite, and it kind of gets overlooked a lot, is Barry Lyndon.
oh yeah,
And it's actually probably, I mean, we talked about Kubrick's movies being cold. I would not describe Barry Lyndon as being cold.
Yeah.
no, or
it actually-
Doctor Strangelove. I don't think is cold either. Weirdly,
Yeah. So
I like Doctor Strangelove. All
I
right,
don't know. I was just curious about that.
Yeah.
You know, I once started Clockwork Orange, and then I also stopped Clockwork Orange.
that is regarded as one of his best ones, and I still
Do not care.
I still don't care for it. Weirdly,
I
Very
haven't
artistic.
watched it. I haven't watched it.
yeah. All right,
You don't need to.
moving on to critics. On Rotten Tomatoes, 2001: A Space Odyssey has a 92% from critics and an 89% from audiences.
Man, we are good at getting in that average, aren't we?
Yeah. On Metacritic, it has a very respectable 84 out of 100 and an 8.2 from audiences. And on IMDb, it has a stellar 8.3 out of 10.
Some would
It's hard-
say Interstellar.
It's hard to get up in the 8s on IMDb, and this one did it. Box office. This movie released on April 3rd in 1968. I've got a budget of $40 million for this one, which I will be factoring in inflation for this. That is $95 million today.
What's that in
pretty big budget.
2001's dollars?
Also, keep in mind with your predictions, I am counting all the re-releases of this movie, which this one did, and I am inflating them based off the 1968 number. So this number will be totally inaccurate to what it actually is. But this movie had somewhat like 4 re-releases, and those re-releases, they get the movie a little bit of extra change, but it's not close to where the movie's original release was. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah.
I suppose.
So, just to keep it simple, I inflated the total based off 1968, even though that is factoring in the re-release numbers.
Okay.
Okay?
Can you tell us that inflated total one more time?
Don't we normally go
90?
not
The
inflated?
inflated budget... Well, this one's so far back, so it's inflated.
All right.
Yeah, it's 60s. I inflate... we do the inflation when it's in
Pre-90s
the
pretty
80s
much.
and older. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, some 90s too. All right. Based off of that inflated $95 million budget, what did this movie make worldwide? David, let's start with you.
What was the inflated number again?
95 million.
85 million.
You always ask.
I
love
I
it.
was doing some math in my head with the original numbers, and then I was
Yeah.
going to try to multiply that with the. And then I realized that you already asked. I was like, crap, I have to go first. Ask somebody else. I'm doing math.
No, you're doing it. Too bad. It's you. I called you.
Why do you have to do math? It's a guess.
David.
480 million.
All right, 480 million. Irina.
I'm gonna go with significantly under. I'm gonna go 250.
Noah.
I will bridge that gap with a 320.
AJ.
If we're factoring in re-releases, I'm going to say 700.
AJ is the closest.
Dang.
This movie.
Yeah, I have
Did I
absolutely
say
no idea.
320? I actually meant 620.
Oh, it still doesn't matter. AJ.
I actually meant
1,720,000.
Silly me.
$100 million.
Okay, then Noah.
wow, I'm so good.
No, this movie inflated, including re-releases, is at $1.16 billion.
What?
A
Get
lot.
out of town.
Wait, which town?
Yeah, this
Cincinnati.
movie, massive hit. It weirdly is one of those ones where it didn't have the greatest opening, but man, this thing had legs.
Yeah, you kind of
kept
faked
going.
me out with that bad opening.
I thought
Yeah.
so. I
Yeah.
thought so too.
Yeah, it just kept going, and it was one of those things where it was weirdly polarizing for critics. Critics were like what is this-
Avatar.
what is this BS? And some of them loved it, but then there were other people like audiences in the audience who just were like having a come to God moment where it was just
I could imagine.
yeah,
ecstasy
the
watching
irony
it.
of that
Yeah.
statement in this movie.
Yeah, so really weird vibe around this movie in terms of what people thought of it. But big, huge hit, a kind of a harbinger of things to come when it comes to sci-fi. Ridley Scott actually recently said like 2001 killed sci-fi because it did it so perfectly at the time that no one could ever amount to it. Obviously, Ridley Scott made the classic Alien and all that stuff, so he was okay. And Blade Runner. Didn't really hurt him, but that's what he said. So, massive success. Is there a sequel, guys? Is there a sequel?
I
think there might be.
Yeah, on the horizon.
It's such a weird
Bum, bum.
sequel. I get the sense that Kubrick hates the idea of sequels. I don't know. He's never said that, but I would imagine like the idea of sequels to him are just the worst thing ever.
Yeah,
Just-
I could see him thinking them as
Yeah.
trash.
He did live to see this
He must
a
be
sequel
my arch
to this film
nemesis.
come to pass, though. Arthur C. Clarke actually wrote a sequel to the original book called 2010 Odyssey 2, and that was in the 1980s. I think it was like 1982. And you know when that happens, when a sequel comes out to something that's a big success, Hollywood's like, guys,
Gotta
get
trash
on
it.
Yeah. I mean, what the funny parallel here is that it happened with The Shining 2, directed by Stanley Kubrick. Stephen King finally wrote a sequel, Doctor Sleep. The moment he wrote a sequel, they were like, all right, guys, get on it. Let's make that movie, Doctor Sleep. And I just find that funny that happened to Kubrick twice. He, like, directed the original classic, and then a sequel book is written, and
Yeah.
then they're like, okay, make this.
Yep.
But yeah, the sequel in question here, or that we're talking about here, is 2010, the year we make contact. In some areas, it's just called 2010. Other places you look, it's called 2010, the year we make contact. Released 16 years later. And it is the movie we're talking about next week.
Yippee.
Yep. Next week. Y'all excited for 2010, the year we make contact?
I already lived through that year.
Could you imagine being the director who's handed this, like, hey, make a sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey?
And they're just
He actually called Kubrick up and asked for permission.
Did he? You already know this. That's a man. You're giving away teasers for our next episode that I don't even know. But I'll do my research. But yeah, next week, 2010, the year we make contact.
Cool.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer.